Chapter 100. Holding the profound spirit furnace in both hands, the palm-sized cauldron body instantly became thick. With a slight thought, two flames immediately rushed into the furnace body from the two hands and flew up in the middle of the profound spirit furnace. This was Yang Chen's method of using the imperial tool, not simply the imperial fire. All the reactions of the profound spirit furnace made Yang Chen feel a sense of ease. Even under the control of his spiritual awareness, where there was a grain of dust in the profound spirit furnace, seemed to be able to know clearly. For the first time, he used the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. Although it was only the first layer, Yang Chen had a deeper understanding of the sacrificial refining of the magic weapon. When he was on the Immortal Executioner stage, Yang Chen just remembered all of these firmly. It was not until he began to cultivate that he discovered the mystery of it one by one. This was just a heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. When the spiritual power was sufficient and the cultivation base was sufficient, he could also use the Earth Fiend sacrificial formation secret art on these magic weapons, and then all the magic weapons could also be strengthened by the universe treasure-raising secret art. Yang Chen could already imagine that when all these things were complete, and he used the genuine Yin and Yang 5-element secret art, how powerful his magic weapon would be. And the spiritual power of the Yin and Yang 5-element secret art in Yang Chen's body also seemed to have some changes because of the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. In each attribute of spiritual power, there seems to be a combination of directional changes. Yang Chen has a feeling that because of the cultivation of the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art, every attribute of spiritual power in his body was divided into 36 tiny spiritual powers. These 36 tiny spiritual powers condensed together according to the position of the heavenly spirit, forming his own 10 kinds of Yin and Yang 5-element spirit power, a total of 360. After this combination of spiritual power, it was more solid and more stable. At the same time, this also means that every time he makes a move, whether it is attack or defense, or even alchemy refining, every time there will be a natural Yin and Yang 5 elements formation, every spiritual power, there will be a heavenly spirit array. The array in the array, just this subtle change, made Yang Chen's attack and defense increase out of thin air. There were also some changes in his spiritual awareness. Originally, it was just a crazy strengthening, but now he began to feel the subtle changes in the elemental spiritual energy in his body. That was how he could sense the heavenly dipper formation formed by the 36 strands of spirit energy. Yang Chen had a premonition that as long as the 360 threads of spiritual power grew stronger, the spiritual power in his body would also grow stronger. His increasingly sensitive divine sense even discovered that among the 36 strands of spiritual power, there was a strand that was relatively thicker than the other strands of spiritual power. After pondering a little, Yang Chen understood that it was because he had only cultivated to the first layer of the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. The current Big Dipper formation was far from being a complete Big Dipper formation, but just the first level made Yang Chen feel that under the same spiritual power situation, the attack power had increased by at least 30%. He really didn't know how powerful the Tianyang formation would be if it was complete. What also made people look forward to it was the Earth Fiend sacrificial formation secret art, which was almost the same as the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. Would it allow his spiritual power to be divided again and gather the number of heavenly spirits and earthly fiends? Maybe when the time comes, it would be 10 Big Dipper and earthly fiend formations with a single blow, and it would make people crazy to think about it. The profound spirit furnace was an alchemy furnace. In the future, it would need a variety of Yin and Yang 5 elements attributes. Therefore, Yang Chen used the 10 attributes of Yin and Yang 5 elements secret art for sacrificial refining, which was only good and not bad. However, in the next sacrificial refining of the sword sheath, Yang Chen couldn't help but begin to be in a dilemma. Which one should be used to achieve the best effect? Before making a decision, Yang Chun had to consider what the main weapon he would use in the future was. After all, the sword sheath was just a sword sheath. No matter how high the grade was, it was just a sword sheath. If he wanted to fully exert the power of the sword sheath, he needed to supplement it with a powerful flying sword. And what kind of flying sword would he use in the future? This question, Yang Chun had only a vague concept before and did not pay much attention to it. But now it was different. Facing the problem of determining the direction of development in the future, Yang Chun also needed to calm down and think about it carefully. Fortunately, this problem did not confuse Yang Chun for a long time. Since he has chosen the Great Yin and Yang 5-element secret art, he could only choose to use the Heaven and Earth Yin and Yang 5-element secret art to refine the origin flying sword. Then, the sword sheath still needed to use the spiritual power of the Yin and Yang 5-element secret art for sacrificial refining. The grade of the sword sheath was much higher than that of the profound spirit furnace at the moment, and Yang Chun's effort was also several times that of the profound spirit furnace. It took more than 2 months just to sacrificial refine the sword sheath. The first layer of the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art was also becoming more and more proficient, and the sword sheath was becoming more and more sharp. In his hand, it still looked like an immortal beheading blade, but from time to time, it flashed with a burst of sharpness, making people see that it was a peerless, famous blade. It's just that in the eyes of Yang Chun, he couldn't help but shake his head. A truly powerful magic treasure wouldn't show off its edge like this. This was something that could be seen from old Lord Taishang's item. What jade bottle, immortal binding rope, diamond chakram, banana fan, and so on, they all looked inconspicuous, but any one of them was also a rare, good magic weapon in the heavens and the earth. The peerless famous weapons had been honed and baptized countless times before they could achieve the true brilliance and restraint. The magic weapon and people were actually the same. With Yang Chun's current understanding, it was because he was still showing off his sharpness, so the magic weapon would also reflect his cultivation state. Perhaps, after the major competition, Yang Chun should consider where to sharpen himself. Calculating the time, there were still a few days before he could go out. Yang Chun simply took out the jade bottle of the Xiangyang Mountain Medicine Garden. Before, because Yang Chun's cultivation was low, he only left a spiritual awareness imprint. However, the grade of this medicine garden was higher than that of the sword sheath, and Yang Chun did not expect to succeed in sacrificial refining at this time. Taking out the medicine garden was just to be able to solve the thunder pomegranate matter as soon as possible. Planting the thunder pomegranate required extreme environments, but this was not the only requirement. The reason why countless predecessors did not successfully plant it was because there was a lot of effort in the treatment of the seeds. The thunder pomegranate was not planted in the land of thunder from the beginning, and although its seeds seemed to be full of spirit power, they were actually empty inside. The seeds that could survive must be planted in a place with abundant first with spirit power and absorb enough spirit power to be planted. Otherwise, it would be impossible to germinate and take root. Moreover, when absorbing spirit power, it could not be contaminated by other spirit power, so it would not grow easily. In the medicine garden, there were some firstwood plants, and the place where they grew happened to be full of firstwood spirit power. Yang Chun carefully broke the thunder pomegranate with a wooden knife, and after placing all the pomegranate seeds one by one, he withdrew from the medicine garden. Now, he could only wait for them to slowly absorb the spirit power. After doing this, Yang Chun repaired himself and adjusted his whole body to the best state. Finally, it was time to go out of the seclusion. The second day after he went out was the day of the sect's major competition. Note, regarding the choice of the Thunderwood attribute, everyone has their own advantages. Golden Fire Wood, I chose the wood attribute, but it does not mean that it is completely correct, please understand. 1. Lifebook 3 Lives Connection. In the division of 10 stems in the astronomical section, firstwood belongs to the Thunderwood. This is because thunder is blown out by Yang Qi. The firstwood is Yang. Take the image as thunder. In the second month of the lunar calendar, thunder bursts, which can be used as a sign of the firstwood flourishing in spring. 2. Thunder belongs to the Zhun hexagram in the Zhou 8 diagrams, and Zhun is the east. In the east of the 5 elements, it is the wood. The first hexagram of the palace 8 diagrams of the 64 hexagram is that Jun is thunder. Chapter 101. Coming out of the seclusion room, the moment he saw the sunlight again, Yang Chun suddenly had an impulse to try. It seemed that the body's instinct was also very much looking forward to the set competition that would be held tomorrow. The set competition was carried out by realms. Generally speaking, it was very dangerous to watch the battle across realms. Even if there was a higher level of protection, it was still a very risky thing. Generally speaking, people of the same realm were watching the battle. Of course, it was also a competition of the same realm. The rules of the competition were to calculate the points according to the number of wins and losses in the same realm, and then rank the rankings. Those ranked at the front would be able to enjoy better treatment, while those ranked at the back would have to spend more set contribution points to obtain such treatment. This kind of competition was also stimulating all the disciples to cultivate crazily. Of course, there were obvious advantages and bonus points for challenging above realms, but few people would do this. Generally speaking, the teachers did not recommend that disciples challenge above realms. Not to mention the danger, it would also seriously dampen their self-confidence, and the gains were not worth the losses. What Yang Chun participated in was naturally the Qi refining realm competition. All the disciples in the Qi refining realm would fight today, challenge others, or be challenged by others. The venue was, of course, in the Nine Earth Mountain Villa. Because of the performance of Yang Chun and Gong Sunling on the Celestial Stairway, the Palace Master of the Chunyang Palace personally came to watch the Qi refining realm competition. This also made all the disciples excited. As long as they left a deep impression in front of the head of the palace, would they still have to worry about their future cultivation? As a disciple, Chu Hong appeared this time as the arbitrator and defender of the competition. At the same time, there were more than a dozen experts in the foundation stage, including Du Qian of the Law Enforcement Hall. Yang Chun was not very interested in challenging the Qi refining disciples of the Nine Earth Mountain Villa and seizing their cultivation resources. The only one who could make him have the desire to learn from each other was Gong Sunling. As for Sun Haijing, he was the target of a life and death challenge, and their relationship had become enemies. Gong Sunling didn't waste these 3 months either. At least when Yang Chun first saw her, he knew that she must have broken through again within these 3 months and entered the realm of Qi Training Stage 7. Compared to Gong Sunling before she ascended the Heaven Stairway, the current Gong Sunling was more proactive and had more fighting spirit, as if she was ready to compete with everyone in the world. Because this fighting spirit brought about a change in his temperament, it made people's eyes light up. Originally, Gong Sunling was a rare beauty. Now, she had more confidence and initiative. For the past 3 months, she had been cultivating in closed-door meditation. This was the first time she showed her face. However, the moment she showed her face, she immediately attracted the attention of all the aura refining disciples. Even Chu Hong stared at Gong Sunling's eyes with an indescribable taste. In the past, Gong Sunling was kind, but not to everyone. Now, this temperament gave her a trace of an inviolable and otherworldly feeling. Although almost everyone's eyes were on Gong Sunling, no one dared to go up and say a word to Gong Sunling. A smile appeared on Yang Chen's face as he greeted Gong Sunling from afar. Seeing that it was Yang Chun, Gong Sunling immediately smiled at Yang Chun. Just this slight smile, and the feeling of everyone. It was as if the skies suddenly cleared up. Any little discomfort in their hearts disappeared without a trace in this smile of Gong Sunling. With just a greeting from these two, the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace, who had already arrived at Nine Earth Mountain Villa, but had yet to show himself, immediately noticed the abnormality between Yang Chun and Gong Sunling. One could make people not dare to casually strike up a conversation, but a smile could make people feel as open as the sun. The other could maintain a normal state of mind no matter what. This was truly rare. It had to be known that right now, which disciple of Nine Earth Mountain Villa wasn't in fear and trepidation. They were afraid that their performance would be discovered by the Palace Master, so all the disciples were extremely reserved. Even many of the Foundation establishment disciples, in charge of arbitration and protection, had the same thoughts. Apart from Yang Chun and Gong Sunling, only 2 or 3 Foundation establishment disciples could behave so calmly. It was not surprising that Gong Sunling had entered the 7th level of Qi refining. Her strength had increased, and her mental state had also broken through. But for a 3rd level Qi refining outer sect disciple to have such a mental state, it was no wonder that she was able to reach the top of the heaven's stairway twice and cripple 19 Golden Core Masters. She was indeed extraordinary. The sect master had only appeared in front of the outer sect disciples once, and hadn't even said a word, but everyone was already excited. Hearing about it was one thing, and seeing it was another. Sun Haijing stood quietly in the corner with an unfathomable smile on his face. He also knew from Chu Hong why the palace master of Chunyang Palace had appeared here. Watching Yang Chun and Gong Sunling greet each other from afar, Sun Haijing suddenly had a funny idea in his heart. If Yang Chun, whom the palace master had high hopes for, was killed during the sect competition, what kind of mood would they have at that time? Not only Chunyang Palace, all the sects allowed disciples to launch life and death challenges. This was the most direct way to solve a dispute openly, and no one would pursue it later. Of course, this was only in theory. Only the people involved knew whether or not they would be pursued. But at this point, what was there for Sun Haijing to be afraid of? Between being immediately killed by Yang Chun and the possibility of being pursued after killing Yang Chun and being unable to advance one's cultivation from then on, even an idiot wouldn't know what to choose. Chu Hong announced the start of the competition. In an instant, the martial field of 9 Earth Mountain Villa immediately boiled over. Many disciples began to challenge disciples of the same level according to their respective small realms. Very quickly, the martial field was filled with the shadows of blades and swords. Yang Chen didn't move, and neither did Gong Sunling. But in the corner, Sun Haijing leisurely challenged a disciple at the peak of Qi condensation. His appearance immediately caused many people to clamor. Sun Haijing was only a disciple at the 4th level of Qi condensation. How could he dare to challenge an expert at the peak of Qi condensation? Moreover, he was actually the publicly recognized #1 expert among the outer sect disciples. Challenging someone above one's level was allowed in the competition, and it also gave the highest score. But for the person being challenged, it wasn't a good thing. The strong bullying the weak wasn't honorable, and losing was even less worth it. Even if it was a challenge above one's level, it was usually a 3rd level challenging a 4th level, and a 4th level challenging a 5th level. Challenging someone above 5 levels was unprecedented. Junior Marshall Brother's son, think carefully. The disciple being challenged was called Zhou Zai. He wasn't very old, only in his early 30s. From the time he started cultivating to the peak of Qi condensation, it had only been a short 15 to 16 years. He was only one step away from Foundation establishment. In these few years, he absolutely dominated the outer sect disciples to become the #1 expert. He wouldn't be afraid of Sun Haijing's challenge and only lightly reminded him. Sun Haijing burst into laughter and opened his hand. A sword shadow flew out from his hand and circled around Sun Haijing's body. Chapter 102. Magic Weapon. The spectators couldn't believe their eyes. The sword shadow released by Sun Haijing's hand, the light it emitted, and the momentum it carried was clearly a magic weapon, flying sword. He was just a disciple in the Qi refinement stage. Where did he get the flying sword? How could he use it? A series of questions immediately appeared in everyone's mind. Yang Chun looked at this scene, and his brows deeply wrinkled. It looked like Sun Haijing's situation was very similar to a tyrannical speed training method that he knew of. This kind of training method could be found in the Sutras Pavilion of the 9 Earth Mountain Villa. However, the price of practicing this kind of training method was too high. Almost no one would choose this kind of training method. Almost no one didn't mean no one. Sun Haijing was like this. In just a few months, his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. He had even surpassed the peak of the Qi refinement stage and was close to the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage. Even the flying sword in his hand was obtained a few days ago when he ambushed and killed a loose cultivator who had just reached the early stage of the foundation establishment stage. Not everyone was like Yang Chun and read all the jade slips in the Sutras Pavilion. Almost 90% of the people didn't know what happened to Sun Haijing's abnormal situation. They only knew that Sun Haijing, a disciple in the 4th level of the Qi refinement stage, suddenly had the strength of the foundation establishment stage. How could they not be surprised? Chunyang Palace had already produced 2 genius disciples in the stairway gathering this year. Could it be that another one had quietly appeared? Was Chunyang Palace really bursting with popularity and gathering geniuses this year? The crowd's surprised and doubtful voices made Sun Haijing feel unusually satisfied. Everyone's disbelief and disbelief made Sun Haijing feel like he was bathing in the spring breeze. He felt like he was floating. After being humiliated by Yang Chun in front of so many disciples, the feeling of being disgraced was swept away. A huge sense of satisfaction filled Sun Haijing's body. Even the Imperial Censor's flying sword was a little more agile. Zhou Zai, who was opposite Sun Haijing, had a serious expression on his face. Even though his opponent had already revealed his flying sword, as a disciple at the peak of the Foundation Establishment realm, he still had a fighting chance. The expression on Sun Haijing's face was too uncomfortable. Even though Zhou Zai knew that his chances of winning were not high, he would not give up immediately. Faced with a magic weapon, the flying sword, Zhou Zai took out his trump card, a talisman. It was also a sword, but its level was much lower. It was just a talisman sword. Even so, it still gave off a soul-stirring power. The sword, which had been refined for a long time, suddenly gave off a chilling sword chi. Zhou Zai had erupted with a powerful aura that refused to admit defeat due to Sun Haijing's sudden challenge. For a moment, it was on par with Sun Haijing's flying sword. You won't cry until you see the coffin. Sun Haijing sneered and took the initiative to attack. In his opinion, since he had revealed his magic weapon, the flying sword, his opponent should immediately admit defeat, bow down, and hand over the victory. Why would there be a need for a fight? Wouldn't this greatly reduce his sense of pride in winning? Facing Zhou Zai, who was ignorant of the current situation, Sun Haijing's first move was to kill. The flying sword went straight and stabbed at the center. Zhou Zai did not want to lose his reputation as a disciple at the peak of the Qi refining realm. He did not dodge, but controlled the talisman's sword to meet the attack. Clang! An unusually clear and melodious sound was heard. The crowd seemed to hear an indescribable sound. The 2 lights flew to both sides and returned to their respective owners' hands. After Zhou Zai blocked the attack, he found that there seemed to be a little problem with the talisman sword in his hand. He looked down and saw a gap the size of a grain of rice on the blade. He had lost in the sword fight just now. After one move, the palace master of Chunyang Palace could not help but sigh. Although Sun Haijing's strength had improved, it was because he had practiced that kind of overbearing skill. Genius? Not qualified at all. He had thought that there would be an unexpected surprise, but now it seemed that it was just wishful thinking. The palace master shook his head and then glared at Chu Heng, the training tutor. How could a disciple in the Qi refining realm practice this kind of skill? Chu Heng, the training tutor, was very unqualified. This glare almost scared Chu Heng out of his wits. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. He lowered his head and did not even dare to breathe loudly. He almost knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Fortunately, the palace master only glared at him and did not say anything. He just closed his eyes again and continued to observe the situation in front of him with his divine sense. After all, Sun Haijing's strength had recently improved, and he had just obtained the flying sword. Although he looked impressive on the surface, his sword-riding skills were really inferior. Compared with Zhou Zai, who had been immersed in it for a long time, he was not a level lower. However, Sun Haijing had no other skills. He could only rely on the fact that the flying sword in his hand was made of better materials than Zhou Zai's talisman sword. Every time, he would attack the enemy's vital points and perish together, forcing Zhou Zai to compete with him in terms of swords. After a few times, the talisman sword in Zai's hand was already badly damaged. If he continued to fight, the talisman sword would be destroyed. After hesitating again and again, Zai finally gave up. He was about to build his foundation, and this talisman sword had been with him for many years. After building his foundation, he would be able to turn it into a magic weapon, the flying sword. Now that it was destroyed, it was really not worth it. He found an opportunity to jump out of the ring and cupped his hands at Sun Haijing. Junior Brother Sun's flying sword is amazing. I admit defeat. With that, he turned around and left without looking back. Sun Haijing had won a round. Hearing the waves of envious exclamations coming from below the ring, he was unusually satisfied. After feeling smug for a long time, he finally turned to Yang Chun and called out, "Junior Brother Yang, you won't be a coward in my life or death challenge, right? Junior Brother Yang, do you dare to accept the challenge?" Once these words were spoken, another wave of exclamations immediately rang out. According to the rules of the sect's internal competition, in a life or death challenge, those with lower cultivation levels did not have to accept the challenge. If Yang Chun did not accept the challenge, Sun Haijing would not have the opportunity to cause trouble for Yang Chun. His question was obviously to force Yang Chun to accept the challenge. However, Yang Chun laughed and stepped into the martial arts arena. His actions also attracted a wave of astonished gazes. Sun Haijing had clearly demonstrated the strength of an early-stage foundation-building cultivator. How could Yang Chun, a disciple of the third layer of Qi training, be so unwise as to go up and die? Standing in front of Sun Haijing, Yang Chun looked at Sun Haijing, whose eyes were already shining with a complacent light. He suddenly asked, "Senior Brother Sun, when you found this technique, did you look at the explanatory jade slip on the side? Do you know that if you practice this technique, you definitely won't live more than half a year?" As soon as Yang Chun said this, Sun Haijing's expression immediately changed. Chapter 103. The fact that Yang Chun had read the jade slips for half a year in the scripture pavilion was no secret at all in the Nine Earth Villa. Yang Chun knew Sun Haijing's cultivation method, which Sun Haijing was not surprised at all. However, the annotation jade slip next to him, Sun Haijing had never seen it before. He didn't even know that there was a piece of annotation jade slip. This was also the reason why his expression changed greatly. At this moment, he suddenly felt a fear that came from the bottom of his heart. His master, who usually supported him absolutely, became the source of his fear at this moment. This method had such a huge flaw, but why didn't Chu Heng tell him? Sun Haijing could think of a reason for this, but he absolutely didn't want it to be this reason. Trapped in a dilemma, Sun Haijing stood where he was in a daze. Although the words of the two were low, they could not be hidden from the ears of the people watching the battle. Hearing that Yang Chun only used a sentence to make Sun Haijing lose his composure, it seemed that everyone understood the truth of the matter. For some unknown reason, Sun Haijing actually cultivated an overbearing method that was quick but at the cost of his life. He forcefully increased his strength and was able to defeat Zai. However, he didn't know the fatal flaw of this method, which was why he was in trouble now. No one would suspect that Yang Chun and Sun Haijing didn't get along. The two of them had been in conflict ever since Yang Chun wanted to join Qinyang Palace. At that time, Sun Haijing was beaten by Yang Chun until he had to lie in bed for a long time to recover. Now, it was very normal for Sun Haijing to issue a life and death challenge to Yang Chun. However, after clearly seeing Sun Haijing defeat Zai, who was at the peak of Qi refinement, Yang Chun still agreed to the life and death challenge. This was very puzzling. Could it be that Yang Chun now had the strength to fight against experts at the peak of Qi refinement or even the early stage of foundation establishment? Sun Haijing, who was in a daze, finally woke up from his trance. Facing Yang Chun, his face suddenly turned ferocious. "You want to rely on a lie to make me lose my fighting spirit? You're still not good enough." As soon as he shouted these words, he immediately recovered his raging, fighting spirit. His eyes were bloodshot, and he released 2 rays of terrifying red light, as if he wanted to devour someone. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter to you anymore. Yang Chun shook his head slightly, his face full of regret. For Sun Haijing, who was about to die, it did not matter whether Yang Chen's words were true or false. Humph, deliberately mystifying things. However, Sun Haijing didn't think so. When he heard Yang Chen's words just now, he was indeed depressed for a while, but he soon realized that perhaps this was Yang Chen's psychological attack to make him lose his fighting spirit. After understanding this, Sun Haijing also became angry, but at the same time, he also relaxed. Regardless of whether Yang Chen's words were true or false, for Sun Haijing, what was done could not be undone. Even if he wanted to turn back, it was impossible. The only way to determine whether it was true or false was after he killed Yang Chun in the life and death challenge. He would go to the scripture pavilion to see if there really was such an annotated jade slip, and if there was such a description on the jade slip. All of these prerequisites, even if it wasn't for the purpose of determining whether it was true or false, Sun Haijing first had to survive. This battle was the most important matter at hand. Junior Yang, didn't you say you wanted to use countless talismans to smash me to death? At Sun Haijing's side, the sword light of the flying sword rose up again, circling around Sun Haijing. At the same time, it added a layer of brilliance to Sun Haijing's body. It also seemed to give him unlimited confidence. With lofty sentiments, he asked Yang Chun, "I want to see, Junior Yang, what kind of talismans do you plan to use to deal with my flying sword? There really aren't many talismans to deal with your flying sword." Hearing Sun Haijing's question, Yang Chun smiled. "I didn't buy many talismans when I went out. Senior Sun might be disappointed. Since Junior Yang has agreed to the life and death challenge, then don't blame me for being heartless." Sun Haijing's face once again revealed a sinister smile. Especially when he heard that Yang Chun didn't have any talismans, it was mixed with a sinister smile. To be able to die by the magic weapon flying sword is also Junior Yang's good fortune. To die by a magic weapon, I don't have that kind of fortune. Yang Chun smiled again. Such a good thing. It's better to leave it to Senior Yang. Following Yang Chen's words, a scabbard slowly rose beside Yang Chun, hovering in front of Yang Chun. It was simple and unadorned, but it didn't have that dazzling light. Since Senior Yang has a flying sword, I happen to have a scabbard. I wonder if it can hold Senior Yang's flying sword? Facing the astonished Sun Haijing, Yang Chun said unhurriedly. As soon as the scabbard appeared, everyone around felt a different feeling. Sun Haijing, who was in the field, naturally felt the silent pressure carried by the scabbard, and his face also became solemn. However, the palace master of Chunyang Palace, who was observing with his divine sense from behind, had a serious expression. He opened his eyes and said, "Good stuff." This sentence directly caused a silent flame to appear in the eyes of Chu Hong, who was serving beside him. How can there be such a coincidence? I have a flying sword, and you have a scabbard? You want to hold my flying sword? Dream on. Sun Haijing also noticed that Yang Chen's scabbard was a good thing. However, no matter how good it was just a scabbard. He had never heard of any master who would use a scabbard as a weapon, let alone refining a scabbard into a magic weapon. In this day and age, those who had a flying sword, which flying sword was not kept in their dantian and tempered all the time, why would they need a scabbard? Whether it's a dream or not, Senior Yang will know after you try it. Yang Chen no longer argued with Sun Haijing, but just said this faintly. "You're courting death." Sun Haijing was furious. New hatred and old hatred surged in his heart in an instant. The flying sword around him suddenly turned into a ray of light and flew toward Yang Chen's face. Without a sound, only a rainbow shadow was left. It was extremely fast. However, what made everyone dumbfounded was that when the rainbow shadow of the flying sword flew not far from Yang Chun, the scabbard hanging in front of Yang Chun suddenly became abnormally huge. It opened up a big hole and directly swallowed the flying sword in one gulp like a hungry beast. No matter how much Sun Haijing tried to control the flying sword disappeared into the scabbard and didn't react at all. It was as if the connection between Sun Haijing and the flying sword had been directly cut off, causing Sun Haijing to suddenly feel a sense of despair. Impossible! Impossible! Sun Haijing, who had lost his flying sword, was like a madman. He shouted and shouted, "You are just a small disciple at the 3rd level of Qi training. How can you control a magic weapon? How can you take my flying sword?" Chapter 104. Others only saw Yang Qin's scabbard flash and Sun Haijing's flying sword disappear, but they didn't expect that the flying sword had been seized by Yang Qin. Hearing Sun Haijing shout, everyone was shocked. What kind of cultivation was it to seize a flying sword that was in use? Although most disciples in the Qi refinement stage didn't have the opportunity to come into contact with magic weapons, it didn't mean that disciples in the Qi refinement stage didn't have magic weapons. At least Yang Qin knew that even in the 9 Earth Mountain Villa, there were a few disciples in the peak of the Qi refinement stage who had a magic weapon flying sword. He wasn't the only genius. These people had also refined magic weapons and flying sword. Some could even use a flying sword. Naturally, they knew how terrifying the ability to seize a flying sword in use was. "Senior brother Sun, you're out of luck. My scabbard can contain a flying sword that hasn't been sacrificially refined." Yang Qin's face was filled with a kind of unkind smile after taking a big advantage. He said cheerfully, "I was worried that I didn't have a chance to find a flying sword, and Senior brother Sun delivered it to my door. Thank you." Sun Haijing was almost angered by Yang Qin's mocking tone and directly spat out a mouthful of blood. Not only did he seize other people's magic weapons, but he also ridiculed them. No one could stand Yang Qin's tone. However, Yang Qin's words made many people feel at ease. That scabbard could only contain a flying sword that hadn't been sacrificially refined. This also meant that Yang Qin wouldn't have the ability to seize other people's magic weapons in the future. Sometimes, having an ability that made others afraid was the source of trouble. Since Yang Qin was only used to deal with Sun Haijing, others naturally didn't have to worry too much. The scene just now even made the Lord of Chunyang Palace open his eyes in shock. After hearing what Yang Qin said, he nodded slightly and closed his eyes again. Yang Qin's explanation was more reasonable. He had not refined it and had only marked it with his divine sense. Even without the scabbard, people with high cultivation could easily take it. It was normal for Yang Qin to need the help of the scabbard because his cultivation was not high enough. Sun Haijing was no longer as arrogant as before. His face was filled with horror, and even his tone seemed to have softened. "Junior brother Yang, you and I don't have any enmity that can't be resolved. Junior brother, don't be so ruthless, okay?" As they spoke, the two of them stopped fighting and each stood at one end of the arena. Sun Haijing's voice was filled with pleading. It seems that this life and death challenge was initiated by Senior brother Sun, right? Although Yang Qin didn't make a move, his tone didn't mean to let Sun Haijing go. "I remember that when I left Jurong Mountain Villa, Senior brother Sun said that it was a pity that he didn't have the chance to challenge me. I never dare to forget it." When Yang Qin said this, everyone looked at Sun Haijing's eyes, and it was different. Everyone knew that Yang Qin was attacked by several killers as soon as he left Chunyang Palace. Although they didn't know what method Yang Qin used to kill those killers, everyone understood that this was a premeditated collusion to harm his fellow disciples. Now that Yang Qin said this, the biggest suspect naturally fell on Sun Haijing. Harming one's fellow disciples was a crime second only to deceiving one's master and destroying one's ancestors. Except for a few unscrupulous sects in the diabolism, no matter which sect, even most of the sects in the diabolism would not tolerate this kind of thing. Suddenly, Sun Haijing became the target of public criticism. If it weren't for the fact that he was now in the arena and the Lord of Chunyang Palace was watching the battle from behind, some people would have been agitated and jumped up to punish him. Even so, there were many people who scolded him. If he didn't leave a good impression of abhorrence of evil in front of the Lord of Chunyang Palace at this time, when would he? Chu Heng's heart almost jumped out his chest. If Sun Haijing faced this kind of pressure and accidentally brought himself out, he wouldn't even have a chance to escape in front of the Lord of Chunyang Palace. At this moment, he didn't know how much he regretted it. If he had known this day would come, He wouldn't have kept Sun Haijing and spent a lot of effort to find a flying sword to give him courage. Sun Haijing also seemed to be aware of the atmosphere of being condemned by thousands of people. Knowing that he would die, he no longer had any scruples and laughed wildly. Ha ha ha, it was I who did it, so what? You are an executioner who has killed countless people. How dare you stand side by side with us diligent cultivators? I want to kill you. It's just a pity that those people didn't make a move, otherwise you would have been a ghost in the netherworld. Chu Heng's worried heart was finally put at ease when he admitted to taking all the responsibility. Beside the Lord of Chunyang Palace, he didn't dare to breathe heavily, but he also felt a burst of relaxation. However, he didn't see that under the closed eyelids of the Lord of Chunyang Palace, the two eyeballs turned in his direction and soon returned to normal. It's good that you admit it. Yang Chen snorted coldly. If so, then die. The scabbard disappeared in the air, and Yang Chun had already flown towards Sun Haijing. Still in the arena, the Lord of Chunyang Palace didn't speak, so naturally, others didn't dare to interfere easily. Seeing that Yang Chun actually gave up his magic weapon and fought with Sun Haijing with his bare hands, everyone frowned and began to worry about Yang Chun at the same time. The opponent had the cultivation of the early stage of foundation establishment. Wouldn't he be courting death if he went up like this? Since you want to die, I will help you. Sun Haijing was even more overjoyed. Yang Chun, who was a thorn in his flesh, actually gave up the advantage of his magic weapon to compete with him in cultivation. Wasn't this the prey that came to him? At this moment, he had no chance to escape. He only hoped to die with Yang Chun. Without thinking about it, he directly flew up and rushed toward Yang Chun. The two figures were almost stuck together in an instant. Everyone's eyes widened for fear of missing any moment. However, to everyone's disbelief, even with Sun Haijing's current speed, his punch still didn't hit Yang Chun. Instead, his wrist was grabbed by Yang Chun, and then he was easily swung up. After a few big circles in the air, Sun Haijing was heavily thrown to the ground by Yang Chun with a bang. The sharp pain of the bones in his wrist being crushed and the dizziness of spinning in circles made him almost unable to resist. He could only see the ground getting closer and closer, and then he fell heavily. As soon as he raised his head, he saw a huge fist appear in front of him. Bang, bang, bang. The continuous sound was accompanied by the occasional cracking sound, ringing in everyone's ears. Yang Chen's fists hit Sun Haijing's head one after another, and in a short while, Sun Haijing's head was smashed into a bloody gourd. Do you really think that I can't beat you without a magic weapon? Yang Chun stopped smashing, pulled Sun Haijing's bloody head, and just twisted it. With a cracking sound, Sun Haijing's head was turned in a circle, still facing the original direction, but his vitality was immediately cut off. Chapter 105. As soon as Yang Chen's spiritual power left Yang Chen's body with the 5 elements positive yin-yang formation, it skyrocketed by 5 times under the effect of the 5 elements mutual promotion. Although his cultivation was only at the 3rd level of qi refining, his vigorous and pure spiritual power was stronger than those at the peak of qi refining. There were also 10 big dipper formations embedded in the 5 elements formation, so its power was even greater. Although Sun Haijing had the strength of the early stage of foundation establishment, under such continuous attacks, the protective formation on his body, which he had just practiced and was not yet proficient in, was broken in just a few blows. The following blow was even more complete. The rotten, bloody head and the lifeless body all showed the fact to all the audience that Sun Haijing had been killed by Yang Chun. Sun Haijing was killed by Yang Chun. Sun Haijing, who had the strength of the early stage of foundation establishment and had the flying sword, was killed by Yang Chun, an outer sect disciple at the 3rd level of qi refining. The top master of the outer sect, Zhou Zai, admitted defeat, coupled with Sun Haijing's arrogance. Everyone had already recognized that this guy had the strength of the early stage of foundation establishment. Just by looking at his flying sword, he forced Zhou Zai, who was at the peak of qi refining, to admit defeat. They could see the clues. In addition to the surprise, they were even more surprised that Sun Haijing had issued a life and death challenge to Yang Chun. However, What was even more surprising was that no one would have thought that Yang Chun, who had just reached the third level of qi refining, would be able to beat Sun Haijing to death on the spot with his bare hands. Although Sun Haijing had admitted to the crime of hiring assassins to kill, such a strong contrast still made the outer sect disciples unable to accept it in a short time. Could it be that the top master of the outer sect was not at the peak of qi refining, but at the third level of qi refining? A little interesting. The palace lord of Chunyang Palace, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly said. Then he just bent his finger and flicked it gently in the direction of Yang Chun on the martial arts arena. The people in the martial arts practice field did not notice anything at all, but Yang Chun suddenly felt a wave of vigilance. His body moved quickly, his arms crossed in front of him, and he directly took a defensive stance. At the same time, dozens of earth wall magic charms flew out of the cosmos sack. In the blink of an eye, dozens of thick earth walls rose in front of Yang Chun. This talisman that could move without wind made everyone's eyes light up. However, the people around were very puzzled. Yang Chun had already won. Why would he suddenly make such a move? Yang Chun didn't have time to explain. He had just finished this series of actions when an extremely powerful force directly hit the wall that had just been raised. Boom! Dozens of thick earth walls, in the face of this force, were as weak as paper. As soon as the destructive force and the earth wall came into contact, the earth wall turned into a cloud of flying dust. This was not all. After destroying all the earth walls, the remaining force accurately hit Yang Chen's crossed arms. Yang Chen's body was pushed by a huge force. His feet did not leave the ground, but his whole body was pushed straight at least a few feet away, leaving 2 straight marks on the martial arts arena under his feet. The tyrannical force not only hit Yang Chen's body, but there was also such a small force directly from Yang Chen's arm into Yang Chen's body and fiercely collided with the spiritual power in Yang Chen's body. The invincible momentum seemed to completely smash Yang Chun under one blow. As soon as he came into contact with the force, Yang Chun felt that it was not good. The spiritual power in his body had already been transformed into yin and yang reverse and 5 elements, and he tried his best to resist the spiritual power that invaded his body. 2 arms, 1 yin and 1 yang, yin and yang reverse and 5 elements, like 2 huge stone mills, began to madly consume the invading spiritual power. The spiritual power of the 5 elements in Yang Chen's body was all mobilized to resist. The people on the periphery only saw that after Yang Chun was hit and retreated, a crystal blue suddenly appeared on his arm. This blue seemed to be alive, quickly rushing along Yang Chen's arm to his shoulder. It seemed that it would arrive soon. At this time, a red light suddenly appeared on Yang Chen's body, and it spread to his arms and began to resist the spreading blue. Standing next to the Lord of Chunyang Palace, Chu Heng, of course, saw the action of the Lord of Chunyang Palace, overconfident. Yang Chun actually wanted to rely on his own spiritual power to fight against the Lord of Chunyang Palace. Chu Heng could not help but give a cold snort and give such an evaluation. The Lord of Chunyang Palace obviously wanted to use this spiritual power to check the strength of Yang Chun. Even with Chu Heng's current realm, he did not dare to say that he could take this blow from the Lord of Chunyang Palace. An outer sect disciple at the 3rd level of qi refining dared to resist without knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. It was really stupid. However, just as this cold snort rushed out of his throat, the situation of Yang Chun on the martial arts field directly gave Chu Heng a heavy blow. The red light stopped an inch below Yang Chen's shoulders. Although it retreated a little at the beginning, after retreating an inch below his shoulders, it stopped retreating and began to be in a stalemate with the blue light. How is it possible? Chu Heng almost suspected that there was a problem with his divine sense, but being next to the Lord of Chunyang Palace, he did not dare to leave without permission and personally go to the martial arts field to see what was going on. He could only make such a sound in his heart and concentrate more and more on exploring what was happening on the martial arts field. The red light and the blue light were in a stalemate for a moment and began to fight back. Slowly, the blue light was pressed back to the bottom bit by bit, and the speed was getting faster and faster. At first, it was just a slight shift, but soon it became a minute, and then an inch by inch. Under the watchful eyes of the public, the spreading blue was pressed to the place where Yang Chun first touched, and became a small piece. After a while, the blue light became lighter and finally disappeared, and the faint red light on Yang Chen's body also began to slowly fade. At this time, Yang Chen's whole body was sweating like rain, and his clothes were all soaked. His rapid breathing exposed the hardships he had just paid. No one knew how much pressure Yang Chen had just faced and how hard he had worked. The Lord of Chunyang Palace, who had his eyes closed tightly, finally opened his eyes again. A mysterious smile appeared on his face. He seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be letting the people serving him hear him. He said, "A third-level Qi refinement cultivator can actually take my rhino spirit finger and can even use magic treasures. Interesting." After saying this, the Lord of Chunyang Palace suddenly raised his voice. His voice directly penetrated the room and resounded in the ears of everyone in 9 Earth Mountain Villa. "Yang Chun, you have cleaned up my Chunyang Palace. This is a great merit. I allow you to make a request that is not too excessive as a reward." The group of people outside were stunned where the attack came from. The words of the pure Yang Palace Master suddenly caused a sensation in the 9 Earth Mountain Villa. Chapter 106. As the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace, a master at the Yuanying stage, in terms of seniority alone, he was even 1 generation higher than the several Palace Masters of Chunyang Palace. Chu Heng and Du Qian, the inner mountain disciples at the Foundation Establishment stage, also had to address him as Grandmaster. Even if they were already official disciples of the Inner Mountain, it was still an extravagant hope to meet the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace. Except for some major festivals and major events, these disciples had no chance to meet the Palace Master at all. With the identity of the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace, it was already a great thing for him to pay attention to the set competition of the Outer Mountain disciples, not to mention that he came in person. The 9 Earth Mountain Villa could simply be described as being honored. But now, the Palace Master actually made a request that was not too excessive. How could it not be surprising? This Yanchen was really a dog shit luck. Everyone had the same thought in their minds. The request made by the Palace Master, even if he had already said that it was not too excessive, still made countless people start to go crazy. Putting aside the identity of the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace, in terms of cultivation, he was a master at the Yuanying stage. Whether it was cultivation methods, elixirs, magic treasures, or even the identity of a pro-disciple, it was not too excessive to ask for. This time, Yang Chun could be said to have reached the sky in a single bound. Some people were jealous, some people were emotional, but more people saw the performance of Yang Chun just now. Du Qian, Chu Heng, and the other disciples of the Inner Mountain were obviously the latter. The telepathic finger of the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace was almost the Palace Master's signature method, which he could use at will. Although it was an understatement, Du Qian, Chu Heng, and the others thought that if it were them, they would not be able to catch it so easily. But Yang Chun, who was at the 3rd level of Qi refining, was so easy to catch it under the premise that he was a big realm lower than them. As long as one thought about the meaning behind this, the Palace Master's action of personally summoning Yang Chun was not so shocking. Everyone looked at Yang Chun enviously. As long as Yang Chun said the word, cultivation techniques, medicinal pills, magic treasures, treasures of heaven and earth, arrays, and even raising one's cultivation, all of it would only take a word from him. Everyone secretly wondered what they would choose if they were in his shoes and faced with such an opportunity. Of course, he was more curious about what Yang Chun would choose. Disciple Yang Chun requests Palace Master to allow disciple to go to Immortal falling abyss. Of course, Yang Chun also heard the Palace Master's voice. Almost as soon as the Palace Master spoke, Yang Chun unceremoniously stated his request. As soon as Yang Chun's words came out, it caused another uproar. No magic treasures, no cultivation techniques, no other treasures, just a trip to the Immortal Fallen Abyss? Most of the people in the 9 Earth Mountain Villa had never even heard of this name. Everyone's first impression was that the immortal fallen abyss was some sort of treasure that made Yang Chun care so much that he didn't hesitate to ask for the palace master's permission. Those who knew about the immortal fallen abyss all sucked in a breath of cold air. The immortal fallen abyss was not a good place, just from its name. It was really surprising that Yang Chun wanted to go there. Even the palace master of Chunyang Palace couldn't help but frown when he heard Yang Chun's request. The other Foundation establishment disciples were in disbelief, but they didn't dare to make a sound as they stood beside the palace master. The palace master was indeed the palace master. He quickly recovered from his shock and smiled. "Since you could take one of my fingers, you have the qualifications to go to the immortal fallen abyss. Fine, I'll make an exception and allow it." With a flip of his hand, a small white jade token appeared in his hand, and he threw it out. The token seemed to be carried by an invisible hand, and it slowly flew out of the room and floated towards Yang Chun on the martial arts practice field. "Go if you're ready." Yang Chun had just reached out to catch the white jade token when he heard the palace master's voice. He hastily replied, "Yes." The rest of the competition wasn't too exciting. The only thing that stood out was Gong Sunling. With her 7th layer Qi condensation strength, she consecutively challenged 3/8 layer Qi condensation and 2/9 layer Qi condensation senior brothers. She won all of them, causing people to praise her outstanding talent. After the palace master gave Yang Chun the token, he didn't say anything else. It wasn't until the end of the competition that he praised Gong Sunling a bit before leaving. With the palace master's departure, the 9 Earth Mountain Villa that had been tense for 2 days suddenly relaxed. There was nothing that could be done. When the palace master was here, even Chu Hong didn't dare to breathe loudly, let alone the others. The only one who had a flat performance might be Yang Chun alone. After relaxing, people began to inquire about what kind of place the immortal fallen abyss was and why Yang Chun had requested to go there. However, the news that they heard shocked everyone. The immortal fallen abyss was a place for the large Sex Foundation establishment disciples to hone their strength. At the same time, it was the only exit for the underground spirit beasts. It was a place for cultivation, a hub to suppress the underground spirit beasts, and also a place to obtain spirit marrow. The underground spirit beasts were related to the safety of the world. At the same time, the spirit marrow was related to the various sects' spirit veins. Therefore, the immortal fallen abyss was an extremely important place. Every sect even sent at least one nascent soul expert to oversee it. The underground spirit beasts were enormous, and they were born from the heavens and earth. They didn't have any intelligence and acted purely on instinct. No matter what was blocking their way, the huge underground spirit beasts would always swarm over and destroy it. The 2 words, Immortal Fallen Abyss, were a warning. The Immortal Fallen Abyss was a famous, ominous place in the cultivation world. This was why everyone was shocked. To go to the Immortal Fallen Abyss, one had to be at least at the mid-foundation establishment stage. Otherwise, the sect wouldn't even give out a token. Without a token, one couldn't even touch the door to the Immortal Fallen Abyss, let alone enter. But Yang Chun had actually asked the palace master to allow him to enter the Immortal Fallen Abyss when he was only at the 3rd level of Qi refining. Even if he defeated and killed Sun Haijing, in the end, Sun Haijing was only at the peak of Qi refining, infinitely close to the early Foundation establishment stage. His true strength hadn't reached that level yet. Was he planning to throw away his life? The only outer sect disciple who wasn't surprised by Yang Chun's decision was Gong Sunling. After the competition, Gong Sunling directly went to find Yang Chun. While reminding him to be careful, she didn't forget to issue a challenge to Yang Chun. "Junior brother Yang, you're ahead of me in the Immortal Fallen Abyss. Watch how I catch up." Yang Chun was very happy that Gong Sunling issued this challenge. This has meant that Gong Sunling was no longer the madman who blindly immersed herself in cultivation and didn't listen to the outside world. Now, she has become more active. "Okay." Yang Chun agreed to Gong Sunling's challenge. "I'll wait for you in the Immortal Fallen Abyss." Chapter 107. You really want to go to the Immortal Falling Abyss? The one who asked this question was Du Qian, who had always taken good care of Yang Chun. He didn't understand. Yang Chun was only a qi condensation disciple. If he couldn't even use his flying sword, how many times could he block the attacks of the underground spirit beasts? Such an unwise action didn't seem like something Yang Chun would do. Of course, Yang Chun smiled and made an inviting gesture, inviting Du Qian to sit across from him. At the same time, he smiled and said, I asked for the Palace Lord's grace. I can't go back on my word, can I? Do you know how dangerous the immortal falling abyss is? Although Du Qian was already a disciple of the law enforcement hall and was at the peak of Foundation establishment, he still hadn't gone to the immortal falling abyss even once. Not everyone liked to go to such a dangerous place to hone their skills. Martial Uncle, I can even memorize the 9 Earth Mountain Villa Scripture Pavilion. Do you think I should go? Du Qian was definitely concerned about him. Yang Chun was very grateful, so he was very respectful to Du Qian. He quickly replied, in any case, the Palace Lord said to go when I'm ready. I think it won't be too late to go when I'm ready. I just need to grab this qualification first. Yang Chen's words put Du Qian's worried heart at ease. So this was Yang Chen's plan. This was a good move. One had to know that although the immortal falling abyss was dangerous, it was rich in resources. As long as one trained for a few years and didn't die, they would basically become a small millionaire. Therefore, the qualification to enter the immortal falling abyss was something that everyone fought over. Yang Chun was still at the qi condensation stage, yet he was able to occupy one. That's fine. Grab this qualification first, and then slowly go after you reach Foundation establishment. Du Qian nodded and said these words with appreciation. Then, he saw that Yang Chen's expression was strange. His heart was shocked, and he hurriedly asked, You are not going to go before building your foundation, right? In fact, Martial Uncle, I plan to go in 2 months. Yang Chun didn't hide anything from Du Qian. He smiled and said his plan, completely ignoring Du Qian's dumbfounded expression. With your current cultivation, even if you go, you won't be able to pass the newcomer assessment. What's the use? Du Qian really did not know what to say. He could only put away the smile on his face and ask seriously, You might not even be able to resist the lowest-ranked underground spirit beast. Are you going to court death? Not necessarily. Martial Uncle, don't forget that I still have the ability to concoct pills. Yang Chun also did not completely reveal his plans. He only said the most comforting words to Du Qian. In the immortal falling abyss, I believe there are still many people who like the second turn qi nourishing pill. As long as I have enough medicinal ingredients, I can exchange it for many benefits. Second turn qi nurturing pill? When Du Qian heard this term, he stood up in shock. You can refine the second cycle qi nourishing pill? You're a second-grade alchemist? Du Qian couldn't help but be shocked. Even most of the alchemists at the peak of the Foundation establishment stage couldn't refine a second-turn pill. Yang Chun, a small qi refinement stage disciple, could already refine a second-turn pill. If this news were to spread, it was unknown how many alchemists would go crazy. A turn meant that one could refine the pill once. A second-grade alchemist meant that one could refine the pill twice, and the effect was almost doubled. The most powerful alchemists, such as Taishang Laojun, could refine the 9-turn golden pill. Generally speaking, the 9-turn also meant the limit of the pill. Every increase in level meant that the level of alchemy would improve a lot. Unfortunately, such an improvement was not so easy. Even if Yang Chun was a great principal golden immortal in his previous life, when he died, he was just a 6th-grade alchemist. From this, it could be seen that high-level alchemists were rare. In this life, Zhu Chantao was already the hall master of the medicinal hall, but he was just a 3rd-grade alchemist, and he had just entered this realm. But this was already an achievement that people looked up to. It was not known how many people were praising Zhu Chantao's talent in alchemy. It was simply a genius. But now, Du Qian had to admit that in the matter of alchemy, Zhu Chantao seemed to be a hopeless, mediocre person in front of Yang Chun. Of course, Du Qian would never dare to say this. He was just too shocked and even forgot to give Zhu Chantao some face in his own heart. The 2nd-grade medicinal pill, especially the qi-nourishing pill, did not require Yang Chun to spend much energy. With the help of the profound spirit furnace, Yang Chun could complete it relatively easily. If he was not afraid that the third-grade medicinal pill would shock the world, Yang Chun would have already started refining it. Naturally, the second-grade alchemist, this was the perfect cover for Yang Chun now. In Chunyang Palace, perhaps there was a genius title of climbing the heaven ladder that could make him temporarily unaffected by the outside world, but outside, the title of the second-grade alchemist was definitely much more dazzling than any cultivation genius, and it was safer. The masters may be happy to strangle the cultivation geniuses of other sects, but they would never be willing to easily offend any alchemist, even if he was only the most ordinary first-grade alchemist. Du Qian left in a hurry, almost at the moment of confirmation. He wanted to report this shocking news to the senior members of his sect immediately. At the same time, he was very grateful that Yang Chen only said this to him alone. This was clearly a big gift from Yang Chen to him. Among the Nine Earth Villa and Yishio Villa, Du Qian was famous for taking care of Yang Chen, and even did not hesitate to fight against Chu Heng, who was a disciple, which made several high-level members of Chunyang Palace very dissatisfied. It wasn't until Yang Chen made the qi-seeking pill that the high-level members saw the value of Yang Chen. Now that Yang Chen had become a second-grade alchemist, then everything that Du Qian had done before would immediately be upgraded to the great height of a discerning eye to protect the sect, and the benefits would definitely be great. In his own small courtyard, Yang Chen pointed out Shunda's 4 people and just sat down to take out the profound spirit furnace to maintain it. He saw that on the top of Meiqing Mountain, a few rays of light rose and quickly flew towards this side. With a slight smile on his face, Yang Chen put away the profound spirit furnace and then walked over, watching the few rays of light and waiting quietly. After a while, a few rays of light appeared over the Nine Earth Villa, but it was a few sword lights. As soon as the sword lights fell, there were a few more figures in Yang Chen's small courtyard. Before Yang Chen could see who was there, Zhu Qintao's voice came to his ears. Yang Chen, can you refine the second-grade qi cultivating pill? Yes, Master Ancestor. Yang Chen hurriedly bowed and replied, then got up slightly. Only then did he discover that in addition to Du Qian and Zhu Qintao, the master of the medicine hall, the master of Chunyang Palace also appeared in his small courtyard. Chapter 108. Zhu Qintao's temper was very impatient. When he heard Yang Chen's answer, he directly took out a lot of medicinal materials from the Chinquin bag and piled them in the courtyard. He eagerly ordered, "Refine it for me to see." In his voice, it was full of expectation and surprise. It seemed that he had never doubted that Yang Chen would lie. After such a long time, Zhu Qintao's aura seemed to be stronger. Although Yang Chen couldn't judge Zhu Qintao's current realm, he also knew that he must have improved. This was Yang Chen's fire-controlling technique, which made him have a further understanding, so that there would be such a realm improvement. Although the master of Chunyang Palace did not speak, his eyes were also looking forward to it, and there was a deep appreciation. Yang Chen, the outer sect disciple, brought him too many surprises. In addition to the medicine hall master and the master of Chunyang Palace, Yang Chen also saw an acquaintance, Su Qingxin, the foreign affairs hall master of Chunyang Palace. Seeing Yang Chen looking over, Su Qingxin also smiled and nodded. He seemed to be very happy. Although the prepared medicinal materials were not as good as Yang Chen's Millennium Profound Yang Fruit, they were also needed for ordinary qi replenishing pills. Yang Chen was not pretentious. He took out the profound spirit furnace from the Chinquin bag and restored it to its ordinary size. He placed it in the yard and planned to refine it on the spot. Anyway, there was the master of Chunyang Palace watching. Yang Chen did not have to worry about any accidents happening. Seeing Yang Chen's profound spirit furnace, the eyes of the master of Chunyang Palace and Zhu Qintao lit up. The palace master was finally completely sure that Yang Chen now had the strength to control and sacrificial refine the magic weapon. This profound spirit furnace was clearly a magic weapon that had been sacrificial refined, and it was also personally sacrificial refined by Yang Chen. Otherwise, it would not be so compatible with Yang Chen. The profound spirit furnace itself was given to Yang Chun by Zhu Qintao. At that time, Zhu Qintao certainly knew what the profound spirit furnace looked like. Now that the profound spirit furnace had obviously improved some quality, Zhu Qintao certainly found it at a glance. With regards to Yang Chen's changes in just over a year, Zhu Qintao felt that he had aged too much. The nourishing qi pill was a very low-level medicinal pill. Usually, it was a first-grade nourishing qi pill, which was suitable for the disciples in the qi refining stage. Moreover, it was very easy to refine. Even Yang Chen's untalented servant, He Lian, could refine it a long time ago. Foundation establishment experts simply wouldn't be interested in this kind of low-level medicinal pill. However, the second-grade qi nourishing dan was completely different. After further refinement, the qi nourishing dan was not inferior to the Peiyuan dan used by foundation establishment experts. In terms of cost and efficacy, it was far superior to the foundation pill. Under the gaze of the Chunyang Palace Master and the two Hall Masters, Yang Chun easily put a large pile of medicinal materials into the profound spirit furnace after treatment and began to refine. Yang Chun didn't count his previous life. In this life, he had refined it dozens of times. The experience of the two lives was familiar. The people next to him only saw that Yang Chun was holding the profound spirit furnace in one hand, controlling the heat, and the other hand was skillfully adding and processing the medicinal materials. He was calm and had a well-thought-out look in his chest, and they all nodded in their hearts. Yang Chen's brilliant fire control method also appeared in the eyes of the Chunyang Palace Master for the first time. Zhu Qintao and Su Qingxin had already seen Yang Chen's fire control technique, so they were not surprised, but the Chunyang Palace Master looked serious, and they didn't know what he was thinking about. In less than an hour, Yang Chun completed the refining of ordinary qi nourishing dan. The medicinal materials prepared by Zhu Qintao were just enough for him to refine a batch of qi nourishing dan. After skillfully pulling out hundreds of qi nourishing dan from the profound spirit furnace, Yang Chun cleaned up the dregs in the profound spirit furnace and put the qi nourishing dan that had been successfully refined into the profound spirit furnace. This time, Yang Chun did not add any more medicinal materials, but held the two handles of the profound spirit furnace in both hands and began to control the fire with full concentration, slowly refining the first-grade qi nourishing dan. Refining medicine was definitely a meticulous work that could not be more meticulous. As long as there was a little carelessness, the powerful fire would burn the medicinal pill to ashes. Yang Chun showed unprecedented concentration. The people watching from the side knew the importance of this moment, and all of them held their breath for fear of disturbing Yang Chun a little. After all, Yang Chun was only a disciple of the qi refining stage. Now he was completing something that the cultivation of the foundation stage may not be able to do, so naturally he had to be careful. This refinement took Yang Chun a full 8 hours. All the people present were cultivators, and no one moved much. They accompanied Yang Chen's refining throughout the process. The extremely thin flame rolled over the surface of the medicinal pill flexibly. In addition to sending a burst of spiritual power, it also brought out a trace of more subtle dregs. After 8 hours, this process was all over. At the last moment, Yang Chun still used the most common dan pulling technique to pull out all the refined qi nourishing dan and put them into the jade bottle that had been prepared for a long time. When all the processes were over, Zhu Qintao couldn't wait to grab the jade bottle in Yang Chen's hand and ejected a medicinal pill to the master of Chunyang Palace and Su Qingxin. He picked up one in his hand and put it in front of his eyes. After the second-grade refining, the qi nourishing dan had shrunk a little, but it looked abnormally round, and there was a comfortable touch in his hand. On the surface of the medicinal pill, two thin lines completely surrounded the medicinal pill and formed two circles. They were slender but clear and could be seen clearly. On the surface of the medicinal pill, the fragrance of the medicinal pill had disappeared a lot, and there was a kind of restrained posture. Zhu Qintao's method of testing the medicinal pill had always been to throw it directly into the mouth. After eating a second-grade qi nourishing dan, Zhu Chuntao closed his eyes and began to feel the medicinal power carefully. The master of Chunyang Palace and Su Qingxin also stopped observing and looked at Zhu Chuntao, waiting for his judgment. The spiritual power is abundant, and the momentum is also urgent. Yes, this is the second-grade qi nourishing dan. After a while, Zhu Chuntao opened his eyes and said these words. The master of Chunyang Palace and Su Qingxin, who were waiting for the result, suddenly showed joy on their faces. Yang Chun, what other medicinal pills can you refine? After the surprise, the master of Chunyang Palace asked aloud. Only qi-seeking dan and qi-nourishing dan. Yang Chen's face immediately showed embarrassment. As for the other medicinal pills, I have only seen the prescription, but I have not tried them. So, you learned your spiritual power and medicinal pills in the Sutras Depository, and no one taught you? The master of Chunyang Palace nodded non-committally and continued to ask. Yes, Palace Master. Yang Chen nodded and replied. This was almost an open secret of Ishio Villa and Nine Earth Villa, and there was nothing to hide. Moreover, Yang Chen did not think of pretending to ask Chu Hong for advice. You can go to the immortal falling abyss with peace of mind. Remember to exchange for more spiritual marrow, which will be of great benefit to your cave residents in the future. There was no expression on the face of the master of Chunyang Palace, and his tone was very calm, but the last sentence somewhat revealed his mood. From now on, if someone talks about your identity as an executioner, kill him directly. If you can't kill him, come back and tell the law enforcement hall, and use the power of Chunyang Palace to kill him. Chapter 109. On the surface, the tone of the Lord of Chunyang Palace was calm, as if nothing had happened. But in his heart, the Lord of Chunyang Palace had already cursed Chu Hong. Du Qian had already reported Chu Heng's attitude towards Yang Chun. But in the eyes of the Palace Lord, an inner sect disciple in the middle stage of Foundation Establishment realm was much more valuable than a little guy who had just become an outer sect disciple less than 2 years ago. If Yang Chun could not even endure this little setback, it could only mean that Yang Chun was a piece of rotten wood that could not be carved. But now, without anyone's guidance, Yang Chun had reached the realm of a second-grade alchemist just by reading in the Sutra Pavilion. And his own cultivation of spiritual power had not only been promoted to the third layer of qi refining in just 3 years, but also killed Sun Haijing, who was at the peak of qi refining face-to-face. It was said that several assassins in the 6th and 7th layer of qi refining had also died in the hands of Yang Chun. If there was such an effect because of Chu Heng's wholehearted guidance, the Palace Lord would certainly be very happy. But it happened that in the past 3 years, Chu Hong did not give any guidance to Yang Chun, and even made things difficult for him, even though Yang Chun relied on himself to learn how to read. Such a genius disciple would be highly sought after in any sect, but he was treated like this in Chunyang Palace. How could the Palace Lord, who worried about the development of Chunyang Palace every day, endure this? In his previous life, Yang Chun did not have much contact with the Palace Master. He did not know much about the temper of the Palace Master. The instructions of the Palace Master, he just agreed. It was the words of the Palace Master that made him feel the anger of the Palace Master, but it was only anger. Zhu Chuntao and Su Qingxin, who were familiar with the Palace Lord's temper, had already heard the irrepressible anger from the Palace Lord's words. Both of them were furious. Chu Hong, the outer sect's training disciple, would probably be in serious trouble this time. Perhaps even his master, the Lord of Bright Moon Palace, Liang Xiaoming, would be implicated. However, neither of them sympathized with Chu Hong. Both of them had a favorable impression of Yang Chun, so they naturally did not have a good attitude towards Chu Hong. Neither of them had expected Yang Chun to be cultivating under such circumstances. If they had known earlier, they would have sent Chu Hong away long ago. How could they have allowed him to cause such a ruckus during the sect's grand competition? For Sun Haijing to be able to raise his cultivation so rapidly in 3 months, who would believe that Chu Hong was not behind this? Perhaps even the assassination attempt on Yang Chun was secretly supported by Chu Hong. Otherwise, how could Sun Haijing, an outer sect disciple of the fourth layer of Qi refining, have the spirit stones to higher seventh and eighth layer Qi refining experts. Of course, these things had to be investigated afterwards. The words of the Lord of Chunyang Palace were to reassure Yang Chun and let him see the support of Chunyang Palace for him, so that he could cultivate with peace of mind. Only Zhu Qintao felt that it was a pity. Yang Chun was now a second revolution pill master. If he concentrated on the development of alchemy, he would definitely be a master of alchemy. Unfortunately, the palace lord allowed him to go to the immortal fallen abyss to hone his skills. Otherwise, Zhu Qintao wanted to imprison Yang Chun by his side and force him to practice alchemy. The happiest one among them was probably Du Qian, except for a few high-level officials. The palace lord's words were simply unstinting support for Yang Chun. It was likely that he had contributed a lot to this. According to the merit, he would probably also get great benefits. Being able to help Yang Chun get rid of his troubles, he also had a lot of benefits. Du Qian hated that such a good thing could not happen every day. Next, Yang Chun put on a posture of collecting medicinal materials from all over the place, almost sweeping away all the medicinal materials that could be used to refine Qi nourishing pills in the market of Meiqing Mountain. After Zhu Qintao returned, he also sent people to allocate a lot of similar medicinal materials to Yang Chun. Yang Chun's Xinquan bag was already stuffed to the brim with raw materials for Qi-nourishing pills. It seemed like he could not put them all away. Fortunately, the merit ring was a spatial magic treasure with almost no restrictions in this world. Even if he had more, he would still be able to store them. Chu Heng had already been stripped of his title as a training disciple. At the same time, he was personally arranged by the Bright Moon Palace Lord to hone his skills in another famous dangerous place, the desolate Sand Valley. The Bright Moon Palace was originally a water-attributed inheritance, but the desolate Sand Valley was a barren desert with few traces of water. Such an arrangement was not without a sense of punishment. Of course, it was also done for the Palace Lord. Yang Chun temporarily ignored Chu Heng, but this did not mean that he would let Chu Heng go. In any case, there was a long period of time to cultivate. Yang Chun had plenty of time to slowly get back at him. As for now, the most important thing was to go to the immortal fallen abyss as soon as possible. The reason why Yang Chun had to go to the immortal falling abyss was because of a secret in the immortal falling abyss. This secret, in his previous life, Yang Chun also heard it from a guy in the heavenly court after he ascended to the immortal world. In the immortal falling abyss, in addition to a place where he could rely on the unique terrain to hunt a large number of high-level underground spirit beasts, there was also a kind of fire that Yang Chun was interested in practicing alchemy, the earth core fire. The power of the earth core fire was not the strongest, but it was the most suitable for Yang Chun at this stage. As long as he could get this fire seed, Yang Chun's fire attribute cultivation base would be able to go to the next level. Whether it was alchemy or refining medicine, there would be great benefits. At the same time, the earth core fire could also improve the grade of the profound spirit furnace. It must be known that the profound spirit furnace could be upgraded by swallowing different fire seeds. There was also a lot of spirit marrow to take, and these substantial benefits. How could Yang Chun bear to enter the immortal falling abyss step by step after he reached the foundation establishment stage? The palace master gave him an opportunity, and he immediately climbed up the pole to win the qualification to go to the immortal falling abyss. Before leaving, Yang Chun had to settle the 4 servants again and pointed out all the characteristics of each person. Anyway, under the guise of reading books in the scripture pavilion, pointing out the 4 servants at the 3rd and 4th levels of Qi refining, others could not say anything. The 4 servants also worked hard. Helian's current fire control technique had improved a lot, and her cultivation base had also reached the peak of the 3rd level, 1 step away from entering the 4th level of Qi refining. Gu Kun had followed Shun Da's footsteps and reached the 4th level of Qi refining. The slightly worse one was Yuan Ting, but she was now at the 3rd level of Qi refining, but she could already refine low-level practitioner weapons. The 4 of them were now very different from when they were in the Ishio Villa. Even in a short month, they had found that Yang Chen's status in the Nine Earth Villa had risen sharply, and their monthly allowance was also greatly enriched, at least saving most of their time to earn contribution points for cultivation. After arranging these, Yang Chun directly left the Nine Earth Villa, but before going to the Immortal Falling Abyss, he had to go to the Ishio Villa first. He had promised the steward of the Ishio Villa, Wang Yuan, that he would give him a millennium profound Yang fruit. Chapter 110. Junior Brother Yang, congratulations. Wang Yuan was the chief steward of Ishio Manor, so he couldn't leave on normal days. Most of the news about Yang Chun came from outside. Seeing Yang Chun appear, Wang Yuan immediately cupped his fists and congratulated Yang Chun. Yang Chun smiled and accepted Wang Yuan's congratulations. At the same time, he also did the same thing and congratulated Wang Yuan. Congratulations, senior brother, for making great progress in your cultivation. Compared to the last time Yang Chun left, Wang Yuan's realm had improved. It was unknown whether it was because he suddenly had an epiphany or because of the guarantee of Yang Chen's 1,000-year mysterious Yang fruit, but he had enough confidence. Originally, he was only in the 8th layer of qi refining, but now he had made great progress, reaching the 9th layer of qi refining. He would soon reach the peak of qi refining, only one big step away from foundation establishment. Thanks to Junior Brother. On this point, Wang Yuan was really grateful to Yang Chun. Originally, he was like Shangwan Feng, with no hope of reaching foundation establishment, so he chose to be the chief steward of Ishio Manor. However, Yang Chen's 1,000-year mysterious Yang fruit had rekindled his hope of reaching foundation establishment. With this motivation, in just a few years, his cultivation, which had been stuck at a bottleneck, had unexpectedly advanced by leaps and bounds. In one fell swoop, he broke through his original realm and walked closer to foundation establishment. After understanding the reason, Wang Yuan even felt that even if Yang Chun didn't give him the 1,000-year mysterious Yang fruit, he would still be able to reach foundation establishment within a few decades. However, when he saw the bright red fruit in Yang Chen's hand, even if Wang Yuan was about to reach the peak of qi refining and had a solid state of mind, his heart couldn't help but beat wildly in his chest. The color, shape, and size of the fruit were almost exactly the same as the 1,000-year mysterious Yang fruit he saw Yang Chun eat last time. No, not exactly the same. It was a 1,000-year mysterious Yang fruit. Yang Chun didn't go back on his word, and actually found him a 1,000-year mysterious Yang fruit. Senior brother, this is what I promised you last time. Yang Chun spread out a 1,000-years-old profound Yang fruit in his hand, and said with a smile on his face, "This time I went to the floating mountain gathering. I specially went there for senior brother. I haven't had the chance to go out, so I've wasted a lot of time. Please forgive me, senior brother." Wang Yuan's hands were practically trembling as he received the 1,000-year profound Yang fruit. After receiving the profound Yang fruit, Zhang Xian froze on the spot, not knowing what to do. Under Yang Chen's reminder, he found a jade box and stored the profound Yang fruit. Only then did he repeatedly thank Yang Chun. There had never been a moment when Wang Yuan felt that foundation establishment was so close to him, as if it was within his reach. He was so happy that his body was still trembling slightly. Originally, as the manager of Ishio Villa, he was a sharp-tongued person. But at this moment, in the face of Yang Chen's thanks, his words were all fragmented and incomprehensible. In the stuttering words, there were intermittent words of thanks, which really made Wang Yuan lose his composure. It was not easy to calm down in front of Yang Chun, and Wang Yuan really considered his future path. With the 1,000-year mysterious Yang fruit, there was no problem in foundation establishment. He believed that in the near future, he would also be an official disciple of Chunyang Palace's inner sect. However, even in the inner sect, there were several different factions. Basically, they were divided according to each palace and hall. According to reason, Wang Yuan himself should belong to the palace or hall that he joined. But now, looking at the young but talented Yang Chun in front of him, Wang Yuan suddenly felt that maybe in Chunyang Palace, following Yang Chun was also a good path. Not to mention Yang Chun's extreme performance in climbing the heaven ladder. Just the fact that Yang Chun was repeatedly valued by Zhu Chuntao the medicine hall master, made him see some clues. In the past 2 years, Ishio Villa had newly promoted outer sect disciples with an elixir called Qi-seeking pill, which could help the new disciples quickly find the sense of Qi and enter the state of cultivation. This alone allowed Chunyang Palace to have 16 more outer sect disciples in 2 years. Compared to before, it was at least twice as much. Who was the credit for this? Although the news was strictly blocked, in the eyes of the manager of Ishio Villa, there were still many clues. All of this happened after Yang Chun entered 9 Earth Mountain Villa. In addition, with the attention of the medicine hall master, if Wang Yuan still could not guess that it was Yang Chun, then he would be a fool. A person who showed 2 geniuses in cultivation and alchemy at the Qi refining stage, no matter which one, was a person who could be flattered, let alone Yang Chun who combined the two. At that time, he was able to choose to be the manager of Ishio Villa and was able to see that after Yang Chun obtained the Millennium Mysterious Yang Fruit, he decisively fell on Yang Chen's side. Wang Yuan was also a resolute and decisive person. Now that he had obtained the Millennium Mysterious Yang Fruit, after a moment of absent-mindedness, he immediately decided what he wanted to do. Junior brother Yang, if there is anything in the future, don't hesitate to call me. In Chunyang Palace, I will follow Junior brother's lead for everything. In the face of Yang Chun, Wang Yuan no longer said any words of gratitude, but said these words of allegiance. His tone was sincere, and he did not show the slightest contempt for Yang Chun because of his high cultivation. I don't dare, Senior Brother Wang. If there is anything in the future, we should help each other. There is no need to say these words in the future. Yang Chun politely declined. Wang Yuan agreed with his mouth, but he also agreed in his heart. He would not say any more words, as long as he followed Yang Chun's intentions when doing things. This time, he helped him reach foundation establishment, and next time, he might be able to condense a gold core. Yang Chun did not realize that he had inadvertently gained a loyal fan. After saying goodbye to Wang Yuan, Yang Chun set out on the road to the immortal falling abyss alone. If it was anyone else, without guidance, they would not know the location of the immortal falling abyss. But Yang Chun clearly knew the way to the immortal falling abyss. After leaving Meiqing Mountain for about 1,000 miles, Yang Chun suddenly found that it seemed that someone was secretly tracking him, but this person was very smart and did not expose any traces. After realizing this, Yang Chun quietly turned in another direction and spent another 2 days riding a bamboo eagle to a seemingly bottomless deep pool hidden in an unknown valley. After putting away the bamboo eagle, Yang Chun reached out and took out the white jade token. He held it in his hand and injected spiritual power into it. A round light ball enveloped Yang Chun. Then, Yang Chun jumped directly into the deep pool and disappeared without a trace in a moment. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, a figure suddenly appeared on the edge of the deep pool. He frowned at the dark, deep pool in the mountain in front of him. After thinking for a while, he reached into the pool and touched it. He did not feel anything special. After hesitating again and again, his body jumped into the pool and began to sink. After sinking 10 feet, there was nothing unusual, but the bottom of the deep pool could not be seen at all. It was just dark. The figure following him felt a lot more relieved. He used his spiritual power and dived again. Just when he thought that he could quickly catch up with Yang Chun, a sudden change occurred. Chapter 111. His spirit sense had been tracking Yang Chen's figure. The person following behind did not notice that a long ribbon had silently appeared in the water. By the time he noticed the change in the surrounding water flow, it was already too late. The long ribbon suddenly rushed forward, tightly entangling the figure of the pursuer. A sword light had just emerged from the tracker's body when he suddenly felt a stinging pain in his neck, and his whole body felt tightly wrapped. The severe pain made the tracker lose control of the flying sword for some reason. The sword light had just flown out of his body when it stopped in the water. Then it flickered and slowly sank into the water. He wanted to exert force to resist the huge entanglement, but the tracker found in despair that he could no longer control his body. It seemed that apart from the feeling of pain, He had no other perception of his body. He had already seen what the ribbon around him was. It was a slender, poisonous python. It was dark green with black markings, making it look very similar to the underwater environment. The poisonous python was not very thick, but it already had the aura of a monster beast. It was just that the aura was very hidden. If it was not so close to his body, the tracker would not have been able to detect it. Being entangled by a demonic, beast-level, poisonous python, and most likely bitten, the pursuer was almost in despair. He really could not figure out why Yang Chun would jump into the water at this place. This was not the entrance to the immortal fallen abyss. Was he here to die? In despair, the sword light that had just sunk slowly began to rise again. Looking at the familiar sword light, the tracker's eyes shone with hope. However, when he saw that his flying sword was in Yang Chen's hand, his hope immediately turned into despair. Yang Chen was holding the flying sword in one hand and waving it about 10 feet away from him. His whole body was wrapped in the faint light of the token. It seemed that even his clothes were not wet. His other hand was holding something and waving it at him. The tracker saw it very clearly. It was a kind of detoxification medicine that often coexisted with highly poisonous demon pythons. Moreover, it was a piece of old 5-color Ganoderma. Seeing the 5-colored zoysia in Yang Chen's hand, the tracker's eyes burst with hope again, but he couldn't say anything. He could only make a pleading expression on his face, hoping that Yang Chen could save him. Until now, he still did not understand why Yang Chen was not attacked by the demon python and was safe and sound, while he, who had a higher cultivation, was treated as prey. Sorry, I never save those who have ill intentions towards me. Yang Chen saw his begging, but he just shook his head slightly. Then the tracker heard Yang Chen's voice. Perhaps his hope was shattered again, and he no longer had the courage to survive. All his futile resistance was given up at this moment. The tracker immediately heard the sound of his bones breaking, and then his vision went black. He only saw 2 fangs appear, and then he entered a bag of meat filled with a fishy smell. Then he lost consciousness. At a close distance, watching the demon python swallow the tracker, Yang Chun stood motionless, as if he was not afraid of the demon python attacking him. After waiting for a while, the demon python, which had completely swallowed the tracker, swam up and down lazily in the water a few times. Its eyes swept over Yang Chun, but it seemed to be afraid of something, and it did not dare to go over. It seemed to be a little irritated, and it turned up and down a few times. Suddenly, the demon python opened its mouth, and a jade belt was spat out with a chinkoan bag tied to it. After spitting out these, there was a cracking sound in the body of the demon python, and its thick body seemed to be a little slender. The demon python seemed to feel comfortable, and once again looked at Yang Chun, and then silently turned around, disappearing into the bottom of the pool. You want to digest this kind of defensive magic weapon. Don't overestimate yourself. Yang Chen's mouth muttered, and directly grabbed the jade belt, grabbed the chinkoan bag, and quickly floated up. After a while, he came out of the water and jumped ashore. This was not the entrance to the immortal fallen abyss, but the nest of a demon python that stirred up trouble in Yang Chen's memory after he ascended 2,000 years later. However, that was 2,000 years later, and the current demon python has not yet matured. In Yang Chen's medicine garden, there were several kinds of medicinal herbs that the demon python was very resistant to, so the demon python did not attack Yang Chen. However, although it had not yet matured, it was still very easy for the demon python to deal with a master of the foundation stage, especially because its attention was attracted by Yang Chen, and the stalker was bitten by the demon python and was poisoned. There was no possibility of resistance. Poor guy, because of a moment of curiosity, and because he felt that his cultivation was higher than Yang Chen's, he could take Yang Chen's life at any time, and unknowingly, he was led into a death trap by Yang Chen. The flying sword in his hand, because the owner's spiritual awareness had completely disappeared, became an ownerless object, and was easily marked by Yang Chen's spiritual awareness, and then thrown into the sword case. This level of flying sword, Yang Chen did not look at it very much, but it added to Yang Chen's collection. The 5-color zoysia was a holy detoxification object, especially the five-color zoysia that was at least 1,000 years old. The more poisonous the demon python, the better the detoxification effect of the five-color zoysia. Just looking at the demon python bite, the foundation stage stalker could not control his flying sword. The toxicity could be seen. Naturally, the five-color zoysia that Yang Chen obtained was also the best of the best. What interested Yang Chen the most was the jade belt. Even after the demon python swallowed it, it could not be subdued and could only spit it out for Yang Chen. It was obviously a good protective magic weapon. It was also an ownerless object. After Yang Chen entered his own spiritual awareness, he discovered that it turned out to be a defensive magic weapon that was sacrificially refined with the fire jade boulder array. The best quality fire jade was used as the material, combined with the earth attribute of the boulder array. As long as the spiritual awareness was activated, it could immediately form a small protective array around the body. Right now, Yang Chen lacked such a protective magic weapon. Although the effect was not very strong, it could withstand a blow from an early-stage foundation stage master. With this fire jade belt, Yang Chen could also have an extra layer of security. The Chinquin bag was directly thrown into the merit ring. Yang Chen first used the universe treasure-raising secret art to warm the fire jade belt, and then wore it on his body. The material was very good, but unfortunately, Yang Chen's level was too low. Otherwise, if he spent some time using the Heavenly Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art to sacrificial refine it, it could definitely become a high-grade magic weapon. With his Fire Jade Belt, Yang Chen felt that his overall strength had risen by 2 points. With a peace of mind, he simply began to organize the guy's Chinquin bag next to the demon python's nest. Chapter 112. The Chinquin bag was the standard of the Taishaman, and there was a clear mark of the Taishaman on it. At first, Yang Chen didn't know which sect this guy was from, but after seeing this mark, Yang Chen understood. In this life, he didn't seem to have the time to form a grudge with the Taishaman. So why did the Taishaman come to his door again and again? This made Yang Chen very angry. Was it because he had accepted a body-refining pill from Shi Shanshan when he was beheading people on the execution ground? If this could also lead to a guy in the great success stage of the foundation stage to spare no effort to suppress himself, then the people of the greatest heaven sect would seem too overbearing. Could it be because of the matter of the Taishaman's Jidon masters on the heaven stairway last time? Yang Chen thought about it and felt that this was the most likely reason. Even if the Taishaman were strong and could be said to be the #1 sect in the cultivation world, they couldn't afford the loss of several Jidon masters in a gathering of Qi refining stage disciples. Yang Chen said in public that he was going to the Immortal falling abyss. Obviously, the news had reached the Taishaman. Maybe they didn't know why Yang Chen did this, but later, the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace, the Hall Master of the Medicine Hall, and the Hall Master of the Foreign Affairs Hall all rushed to Yang Chen's small courtyard. Obviously, something important had happened. With Chu Hung here, it was estimated that what happened in the 9 Earth Mountain Villa couldn't be hidden from the Taishaman. Even if they didn't know what exactly happened, they could roughly guess. Since even the Hall Master of the Medicine Hall, Zhu Chantao, appeared, it was obviously related to the medicinal pill. It was estimated that in order to figure out the details of Yang Chen, they sent people to follow him. Yang Chen had no psychological burden when he killed the Taishaman's people. Moreover, the people were not killed by Yang Chen. I want to find a piece of 5-colored Ganoderma myself, but you had to follow me down secretly. Are you going to blame me for not notifying you in advance? Inside the Chinquin bag, there weren't many magic treasures, but there were several 100 kilograms of low-grade spirit stones. In Yang Chen's opinion, that guy was just a pauper in the building foundation realm. Apart from the Fire Jade Belt and the Flying Sword, there wasn't even a magic treasure. Yang Chen didn't care about talismans or talisman treasures. However, there were a few medicinal herbs that made Yang Chen very happy. They were around 100 years old and weren't particularly precious. However, they also had good medicinal power. It was just enough for Yang Chen to refine a few batches of good medicine. There were also a few pieces of ores that were not low in quality, but they were not too rare items. They were just materials that were above the medium level, but they could be used a little when sacrificially refining the profound spirit furnace. It was better than nothing. The only thing that made Yang Chun happy was a few pieces of jade slips. Yang Chun carefully picked it up and explored it with his spiritual awareness. There were a few pill recipes. One was the pill recipe of the Yin Yang Good Fortune pill, which used the 1,000-year-old ginseng as the main medicine, which was of great use when the disciples of the Foundation realm condensed their Dan. Unfortunately, Yang Chen already knew the pill recipe, which didn't mean much to him. There was also a pill recipe of the Building Foundation pill, which also didn't mean much to Yang Chen. The Huangji Thick Earth Secret Art was the Earth Attribute Cultivation Method of the Taishaman. It was almost the best Earth Attribute Cultivation method under the Jidan stage. The two words Huangji also represented the meaning of the extreme, which was a lot higher than the Earth Attribute Cultivation method that Yang Chen was now diligently cultivating. After reading the entire cultivation method, Yang Chen was ecstatic. Originally, Yang Chen's Yin-Yang 5 Elements Secret Art was pieced together. Now that there was this Huangji Thick Earth Secret Art, Yang Chen almost immediately wanted to return the original cultivation method, but Yang Chen still resisted and first looked at what was recorded on the other pieces of jade slips. The two array diagrams were of the Earth attribute, mainly for defense. One of them was the rock array on the fire jade belt, and the other was also very ordinary. Yang Chen put it aside. On the last piece of jade slip, it recorded the physical illustrations of various medicinal materials and ores made by the Taishaman. At the same time, it also recorded some common magic weapon refining methods, but the content was a lot more than what was recorded in the Chunyang Palace. After all, the Taishaman was the first big name, and it was more profound than the second-rate sect of the Chunyang Palace. Unfortunately, it was not of much use to Yang Chen. After sorting out all of this, Yang Chen picked up the Huangji Thick Earth Secret Art again and began to carefully comprehend the content. Yang Chen did not cultivate the Earth Attribute Cultivation method in his previous life, so he was very cautious. In the beginning, he only cultivated the entry-level cultivation method, so he did not need to pay too much attention to it. However, the Huangji Thick Earth Secret Art was a higher quality cultivation method, so he must try his best to master it before starting to cultivate it. Not all the incantations could be comprehended with just a glance. Everyone had their own views and understanding. It was impossible for the creator of the cultivation method to describe everything in classical Chinese. It all depended on the cultivator's own comprehension. This time, Yang Chen was very cautious. He comprehended for a full 10 days before starting to cultivate. Fortunately, there was a disciple who laid the foundation cultivation method before him. The Huangji Thick Earth Secret Art quickly completed the circulatory cycle, officially replacing the original foundation cultivation method. The Yin-Yang 5 Element Secret Art was fully operated, and Yang Chen had to start adjusting the cultivation speed of the Huangji Thick Earth Secret Art in order to achieve balance with other cultivation methods. However, the overall efficiency improvement brought about by the advanced cultivation method, Yang Chen immediately felt it after the balance. The speed of the accumulation of spiritual power was at least 20% higher than before. Now, among the Yin-Yang 5 Elements Secret Art of Yang Chen, there were already 3 kinds of advanced cultivation methods. Among them, the third fourth fire secret art had always been advanced cultivation methods, plus the newly obtained Huangji Thick Earth Secret Art. He believed that if all 10 kinds of cultivation methods were replaced with advanced ones, it would be much higher than it is now. Solving the tracker and cultivating delayed Yang Chen for half a month. After doing all this, Yang Chen leisurely rode the bamboo eagle to the valley where the entrance to the Immortal Fallen Abyss was located. Directly using spiritual power to input the token, the light on the token quickly enveloped Yang Chen's whole body. Then, the light ball wrapped around Yang Chen began to slowly sink into the ground. The Immortal Fallen Abyss, the only exit of the underground spirit beast, was originally underground. The array here allowed people with a token to enter. Newcomer. Soon, Yang Chen appeared in a stone room with stone walls on all 6 sides. There was no one else in the stone room. Only Yang Chen was alone, But soon a voice sounded in Yang Chen's ear. "Which sect are you from? Report your identity." Chunyang Palace Outer Sect, Disciple Yang Chun. Yang Chen knew that this was the rule and naturally stated his identity. Outer Sect Disciple? Qi Refining Stage? The owner of the voice obviously did not expect Yang Chen's cultivation. He was stunned for a moment, and there was a clear surprise in his tone. Chunyang Palace Outer Sect Disciple. Another person's voice suddenly sounded in Yang Chen's ear. Little Qi Refining Stage. Is this immortal fallen abyss a place where you can come? Chapter 113. Which expert is it? I, Yang Chun, would like to meet you. Yang Chun cupped his fists and spoke to the direction of the voice. The other party's words were very impolite, but Yang Chun felt a sense of familiarity, just that he couldn't remember who it was. Oomph. With a cold snort, the stone wall in front of Yang Chun suddenly disappeared, and Yang Chen's figure directly stood on an empty flat ground. There was no sunlight here. Only a few glowing luminous pearls above his head provided illumination. Although it was not as bright as the sun, for these cultivators, it was enough for them to see everything clearly. In front of Yang Chun stood a row of 4 people. The person who had just spoken and snorted were 2 of them. Yang Chun knew that these were the gatekeepers of the surface entrance of the Immortal Fall Abyss, which had always been guarded by the elite disciples of the major sections. These guards were at least at the peak of the foundation establishment stage, and together with the formation at the entrance, they were enough to resist a mid-golden core expert. Among the 4 people, 3 were people that Yang Chun knew in his previous life, and only one he had no impression of. Now Yang Chun had confirmed that the person who had snorted just now was a valiant guy from the Tianquan sect who had chased after him in his previous life, called Jin Tao. At that time, he was already at the peak of the Golden Core stage, and now he was only at the peak of the Foundation Establishment stage. In his previous life, he had chased after Yang Chun because of the Taishaman's kill order, so now Jin Tao had no reason to treat Yang Chun like that. However, Yang Chun immediately remembered that he had killed Han Jinda and the Golden Core Grandmaster from the Tianquan sect who had been crippled by him on the floating mountain. Perhaps this was the reason. This immortal fall abyss, can't Qi condensation cultivators come? At this moment, Yang Chun also began to pretend to be ignorant, looking around like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. After looking around for a long time, he focused his gaze on the 4 people in front of him, his face full of fear and trepidation, as if he was very unwilling. The immortal falling abyss is not a place where a small Qi condensation disciple like you can enter. The one who spoke was still Jin Tao. You don't have the qualifications. Chunyang Palace is getting more and more outrageous. They even gave this qualification to a disciple in the Qi refining stage. Jin Tao's tone was extremely arrogant. He even mentioned the Lord of Chunyang Palace. Anyway, except for Yang Chun, a small disciple in Lianqi realm, there was no one from Chunyang Palace here. Even if his words were a little arrogant, it was not a big deal. The key was to vent the anger of the sect. Disciple Yang Chun greets Elder Wu. Yang Chun's expression didn't change at all. Instead, there was a look of reverence on his face as he bowed to Jin Tao, who had just mocked him. Yang Chen's actions puzzled the 4, but none of them dared to accept Yang Chen's bow. Yang Chun made it very clear that he wanted to see Elder Wu. There is only one Elder Wu in the Immortal Falling Abyss, and that was Elder Wu Xiong, who was elected by all the sects to oversee the Immortal Falling Abyss. Elder Wu Xiong was originally a rogue cultivator, but with his amazing comprehension and talent, he had already cultivated to the Mahayana stage. Because of his good character and superb strength, he was in charge of the Immortal Falling Abyss. At the same time, he was also the person in charge of the Immortal Falling Abyss. All the rules of the Immortal Falling Abyss were set by Wu Xiong, and no one dared to violate them. No matter how arrogant Jin Tao was, he wouldn't dare to accept Yang Chen's bow to Wu Xiong. Otherwise, there would be no need for the people of the Falling Immortal Abyss to make a move. As long as the head of the Tianquan sect knew about this matter, he would directly abolish his cultivation base and be expelled from the sect. You're not Elder Wu? Yang Qin's tone also changed when Jin Tao dodged. I never said I was Elder Wu. Jin Tao snorted again. None of the four knew what Yang Qin was up to. The Immortal Falling Abyss has changed its rules, and the heads of the sects clearly don't know about it. At least when my palace master gave me the Immortal Falling Abyss token, he didn't say that Qi condensation disciples couldn't go there. Yang Shun stared at Jin Tao's face and suddenly smiled. I've searched through the ancient records, but I didn't know that there was such a rule in the Immortal Falling Abyss. It seems that this is the new rule of the Immortal Falling Abyss. Apart from the heads of the sects, it seems that only Elder Wu can change the rules. Since you're not Elder Wu, then there's no point in saying more. Yang Chun cupped his hands. I will leave and report the new rules of the Immortal Falling Abyss to my palace master. As soon as he finished speaking, the token in his hand flashed, and a faint light once again wrapped around Yang Chun as he was about to leave. Wait, including Jin Tao. The four people were scared out of their wits on the spot. There had never been such a rule in the Immortal Falling Abyss, but Jin Tao didn't feel good when he heard Yang Chen's name, so he subconsciously wanted to suppress him. He didn't expect that Yang Chun would grab onto his sore foot. If they let Yang Chun leave and report this to the palace master of Chunyang Palace, the four people present wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. The four people didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly stopped Yang Chun. Jin Tao took a step forward and shouted, Yang Chun, you have no proof and want to falsely accuse us. Do you know what kind of crime this is? No proof. Yang Chun laughed. How could that be? His hand flashed, and a sound storage rune appeared in his hand. Then the conversation between Yang Chun and Jin Tao was immediately transmitted to everyone's ears. From Yang Chun asking if Qi condensation cultivators could enter the Immortal Falling Abyss, to Jin Tao replying that not Qi condensation cultivators could enter the Immortal Falling Abyss. Hearing this, the four people's faces immediately paled. Yang Chun had the token in his hand. When he first entered, it was already recorded. It wasn't an invasion by demons, and he didn't violate the rules. Now, even if the four of them wanted to use force to snatch the rune in Yang Chen's hand, it was impossible. Their responsibility was to guard the gate, not attack their own people. However, with such a rune in hand, as long as Yang Chun took it back to the palace master of Chunyang Palace, Jin Tao would definitely be in big trouble. Even the other three people would definitely be punished because they didn't stop Jin Tao from making a mistake. How could a small foundation establishment cultivator like Jin Tao violate the rules of the Immortal Falling Abyss? The duty of the gatekeepers was to guard the gate. They only needed to verify that the person and the token were correct. If they dared to break the rules, they would be committing a great crime. No matter how much the Tianquan sect valued Jin Tao, they didn't dare to offend Elder Wu Xiong. This wasn't just a matter of face, it also involved the interests of the sect. If they really let Yang Chun turn around and leave, the four of them definitely wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Among the four, there was a quick-witted person that Yang Chun didn't know. He immediately rushed over and grabbed Yang Chen's arm, saying, I was joking, I was just joking. Junior Yang Chun, please don't take it to heart. Chapter 114. It wasn't that he was giving in, but that the talisman in Yang Chen's hand had disappeared. He couldn't grab it even if he wanted to, so he could only use soft words to make Yang Chun stay. As long as Yang Chun didn't say anything, nothing would happen to the four of them. This person pulled Yang Chun to accompany him with a smile, but his eyes swept over Jin Tao's face, indicating. In the end, he was just a bystander. The real culprit was Jin Tao. This glance was for Jin Tao to come over and solve the problem himself. Jin Tao had never expected that his careless words would be seized upon by the hateful brat in front of him. The brat had even recorded it on the sound storage talisman stone. If he took it outside, he would never be able to explain himself. Sometimes it was okay to kill people, but not to break the rules. Coincidentally, the fallen Immortal Valley was such a place. Even if a nascent soul cultivator broke the rules, he wouldn't be able to escape Elder Wu Xiong's pursuit, let alone Jin Tao, who was only at the peak of the fallen Immortal Valley. The Immortal Falling Abyss was an important place. Once there was a mishap, it would mean a great loss of life. Who could bear this responsibility? Being careful was one thing, but breaking the rules was equivalent to courting death. Are you kidding me? Yang Chen's smile made him feel fake, as if he had been starving for a few days and had just seen a meat bun. He didn't hide his greed at all. So you're saying that I, a small Qi training stage disciple, can enter the fallen Immortal Valley? Of course you can, the guy pulling Yang Chen said with a smile, then let go. Jin Tao was already here, so it was Jin Tao's problem. Anyway, if they really couldn't come to an agreement, they wouldn't be the main culprit. Everyone could see what Yang Chen's expression meant. Whoever caused the trouble would have to settle it. They were all smart people. No one was a fool. Unfortunately, Jin Tao had no choice but to be taken advantage of. The talisman stone in Yang Chen's hand was enough to take away half his life. No matter how much Jin Tao disliked Yang Chen, even if Yang Chen killed the Tianquan sect's disciples and crippled 2 of their golden core cultivators on the stairway to heaven, he could only swallow his anger. The other 3 had already disappeared from Yang Chen's sight. This meant that no matter what Jin Tao did, they would not be able to see him. At the same time, it meant that whatever happened here had nothing to do with them. Of course, Jin Tao did not dare to make a move in the fallen immortal abyss, so he could only grit his teeth and apologize. Junior Brother Yang, I was just joking. Please don't take it seriously. Jin Tao's expression also quickly changed, and he even began to address Yang Kai as Junior Brother Yang. Originally, when a Qi condensation outer sect disciple met an inner sect disciple, he would have to address them as martial uncle. But now, he was lowering his seniority for no reason, just so that Yang Chen would forgive him. But judging from Senior Brother's tone just now, you don't seem to be joking. Yang Chen's expression suddenly turned serious, like an actor's. That's because I'm afraid that Junior Brother Yang doesn't know how dangerous this place is and will be at a disadvantage if you're careless. Jin Tao acted as if he didn't see Yang Chen's change of expression. His expression didn't change at all, and he still said with a smile, "Coincidentally, I have something that suits Junior Brother Yang. See if you like it." With that, Jin Tao took out a small silk eagle from his spatial pouch and stuffed it into Yang Chen's hand without even looking at it. This is a flying magic artifact refined by me. It's made from profound ice silk. It's a bit faster than your bamboo eagle, so feel free to take it. No one was easy to get along with. Just from Jin Tao's smiling face and the face of Yang Chen's cold expression, it was clear that Jin Tao was definitely a person who could get along well with others. The other 4 were the same, so Yang Chen had no reason to be angry. It's only a bit faster. It doesn't seem to be of much use here, right? Yang Chen said, but his hands were not polite as he put the silk eagle into the Chinquan bag. His face showed a smile, and he said, "In fact, this junior brother came to the immortal falling abyss, not for anything else, just to get some 5-element spirit essence. Does senior brother have any here? Can you give me 1,000 or 800 yuan so that junior brother can broaden his horizons?" Jin Tao nearly spat out a mouthful of blood when he heard Yang Chen's words. Who didn't come to the fallen immortal abyss for the 5 elements spirit essence? Was there even a need for Yang Chen to say it? But the problem was that it wasn't that easy to obtain the 5 elements spirit essence. How could he just give 1,000? Jin Tao had been here for at least 4 years, but he only had a little over 3,000 on hand. How could he just give 1,000 to Yang Chen? It was not enough. If he did not show some sincerity, it would obviously not work. In Jin Tao's eyes, there was a flash of a fierce color, but it flashed away and immediately turned into a flattering look. He smiled and escaped from the Chinquan bag with 205 color crystals and forced them into Yang Chen's hand. Isn't it easy for Junior Brother to get the spirit essence? Take these first. If it's not enough, then we'll talk about it later. Jin Tao didn't seem to care at all. Now that we've settled down in the fallen immortal abyss, I'll take you to fight those underground spirit beasts. It's much more precious to fight for it than to get it directly. Haha. Yang Chen still didn't hold back. In any case, Jin Tao's one wrong word had cost him 200 pieces of 5 elements spirit essence. He was probably heartbroken to death, but it was unlikely that he would do anything more. Yang Chen also knew that it was better to stop while he was ahead. He immediately put on a very straightforward expression and chuckled. Since Senior Brother has said so, it would be impolite to refuse. Junior brother, look at that talisman stone just now. Jin Tao asked with a smile after Yang Chun put the 5 elements spirit essence into his spatial pouch. Look at my bad memory. Yang Chun patted his head, took out the talisman stone from his spatial pouch, and handed it to Jin Tao. Junior brother was just joking. Don't take it to heart, senior brother. Jin Tao practically grabbed the talisman stone and infused it with spiritual power. When he heard that it was exactly what Yang Chun had just said, he immediately crushed it to pieces. After doing all this, Jin Tao breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at Yang Chen's eyes, it seemed that there was more intimacy. This is Junior brother's first time coming to the fallen immortal abyss, so I have to teach you the rules. Otherwise, if you make a mistake, you might get injured or even lose your life. Junior brother, you mustn't neglect this. Jin Tao seemed to have become even more intimate with Yang Chun now that the problem had been solved. Please give me some pointers, senior brother. Yang Chun smiled and cupped his hands. He didn't take it to heart at all. I won't hide it from junior brother Yang. This is only the entrance to the fallen immortal abyss. The underground spirit beasts in the fallen immortal abyss aren't so easily defeated. Jin Tao smiled. Every newcomer to the fallen immortal abyss has to learn for a few days how to kill the underground spirit beasts. Only when they can kill an underground spirit beast by themselves will they be allowed to enter the true fallen immortal abyss. Junior brother, you should learn from me for a few days. It won't be too late to enter the fallen immortal abyss when you can defeat an underground spirit beast. Chapter 115. Jin Tao's words were well-founded and didn't violate the rules in the slightest. When newcomers arrived at the immortal fall abyss, they first had to receive guidance from the elders before entering the true immortal fall abyss to fight. This was a rule set by Elder Wu and the heads of the major sections. The main purpose was to prevent newcomers from not understanding the characteristics of the underground spirit beasts and increase the number of casualties. The reasoning was very reasonable, and the rules were very complete. No one could bypass them. Faced with Jin Tao's sudden enthusiasm, Yang Chun didn't lose his vigilance. He wasn't naive enough to think that he had Jin Tao's weakness in his hands and could do whatever he wanted. Faced with Jin Tao's sudden enthusiasm, Yang Chun didn't lose his vigilance. He wasn't naive enough to think that he had Jin Tao's weakness in his hands and could do whatever he wanted. A Peak Foundation establishment expert being blackmailed by a third-layer chi refining cultivator. No one would be willing to do so. There was clearly some kind of conspiracy going on. Soon, under Jin Tao's arrangements, Yang Chun entered Separation Village, a supply town formed by cultivators at the entrance of the Immortal Fall Abyss. Separation Village was at the entrance of the Immortal Fall Abyss, and it was also included in the formation at the entrance. Once out of the formation was Separation Village. The village was underground, just like the entrance. Hundreds of luminous pearls the size of a human head were scattered overhead, illuminating the village as if it was daytime. However, it still seemed a little dark. Even the ruler of a country wouldn't be able to afford such a grand display in the secular world. But here, no one took a second look at the luminous pearls. There were many houses, but they were all very simple and crude. Surprisingly, the concentration of spiritual energy here was much higher than above ground. If you were to cultivate here, it would be much more efficient than outside. Unfortunately, one was only allowed to cultivate for a maximum of 10 years in the Immortal Fall Abyss. After that, one couldn't enter again. This was also a measure taken to balance out the various sections. Separation Village was an important supply station for cultivators in the Immortal Fall Abyss. This wasn't their home, nor was it their sect, but a supply station. The village itself was a huge market. Anyone who could enter the village could do business in the village. However, the currency used here was not the spirit stones from the outside, but the spirit marrow obtained from the bodies of the underground spirit beasts. The 5 elements spirit marrow was the essence of a kind of underground or formed in the bodies of underground spirit beasts, so it was called spirit marrow. Compared to spirit stones, which were measured by weight, spirit essences were measured by blocks. Every piece of spirit marrow was the same size and weight. As for the five elements' spiritual marrow, it was only the color that was different. Spirit stones could provide spiritual power and could also be used for transportation. However, there was only one use for the spirit marrow, and that was to increase the speed at which the spirit veins surged out. Generally speaking, a spiritual vein that could support the cultivation of a golden core stage required 10,000 pieces of each of the five elements' spiritual marrow. A total of 50,000 pieces could double the spiritual power. During the 10 years in the Immortal falling abyss, very few people were able to kill underground spirit beasts and obtain enough spirit essence. Normally, a few people from the same sect would work together and gather the spirit marrow they obtained to improve a spiritual vein and provide it for a few people to cultivate at the same time. With such a use, one would naturally have to use spirit marrow to exchange for everything in Separation Village. This was the case for elixirs and Dharma treasures. Yangshin was a newcomer. Under Jin Tao's guidance, he was assigned a room that belonged to him for the next 10 years. At the same time, he was given a jade slip that introduced various types of underground spirit beasts and settled down. Junior brother Yang, you must carefully study the weaknesses of the underground spirit beasts. You must remember that this concerns your life. Jin Tao was afraid that Yang Chun didn't understand the seriousness of the matter, so he tried his best to remind him. When you feel that it's about time, you'll need to undergo a test. Once you pass the test, you can enter the real Immortal falling abyss to hunt for spirit marrow. How will this test be carried out? Yang Chun asked a question on the road. There's a training field in Li Luo village. You can pass the test by killing one spirit beast of each of the five elements, Jin Tao said with a smile. He tried to make it sound as simple as possible. Let me know when you're ready. Thank you, senior brother. Yang Chun said politely as he sent Jin Tao off. After watching Jin Tao leave, Yang Chun sat down and examined the jade slip with his divine sense. A cold smile immediately appeared on his face. The jade slip did indeed record the weaknesses of the various five-element spiritual beasts, but that was all. Underground spirit beasts didn't only have one type of strength, and the jade slip didn't contain information on the different levels. Although they had the same weaknesses, everyone knew that meeting a low-level spirit beast and a high-level spirit beast wouldn't result in the same outcome. Jin Tao had given Yang Chun such a jade slip, so it was clear that he had some ulterior motives. Unfortunately, he had encountered Yang Chun. Perhaps Jin Tao's knowledge of underground spirit beasts would be multiplied by 10, and he still wouldn't be able to surpass Yang Chun's. His efforts were destined to be in vain. Evil intentions could harm people's hearts, so Yang Chun now had one more enemy in his heart, Jin Tao. If Jin Tao knew that his arrangement today had completely offended Yang Chun, he did not know if he would regret it. There was nothing special about the house. It was just for Yang Chun to rest in Separation Village. There was only a simple bed and a futon. Yang Chun didn't care about this at all. He didn't even sit down before he left the house and went to a marketplace in a corner of Separation Village. The Immortal falling abyss was underground, so there was no distinction between day and night. At any time, there were people coming in and out of the village, and there were people coming and going in the marketplace. Yang Chun didn't feel strange at all. There was no open space in the middle of the bustling market. He directly found a small open space in the corner. Then he took out a jade bottle from his chinkoan bag and put it on the ground. In front of the jade bottle, there was a conspicuous piece of white cloth with 2 rows of black words written on it. Second cycle chi, nourishing pill. 1 piece of jade essence. 10 pills. After putting it away, he didn't shout. He just sat quietly, waiting for the guests to come. There were not many people in the corner. Yang Chun was a new face, and he was also a disciple in the chi refining stage. These foundation establishment stage and dance stage masters could almost determine that Yang Chun was in the early stage of refining stage with a scan of their spiritual awareness. What good things could a junior in the chi refining stage have? No one stopped in front of him at all. In such a situation, Yang Chun was not anxious at all. He just sat quietly and slowly practiced the 3 purity secret art. Only the 3 purity secret art could stop at any time without interference. Just after practicing for less than half an hour, Yang Chun felt that there was one more person in front of him. At the same time, a low exclamation came into his ears. Do you really have a second cycle chi nourishing pill? Chapter 116. The other party's voice was a little surprised, but it was still mixed with more doubts. A second-grade medicinal pill, even if it was a chi cultivating pill, should not be refined by a disciple in the chi refining stage. Moreover, the price that Yang Chun marked was a little low, making people have to wonder if Yang Chun was deceiving people. Yang Chun didn't even raise his head. He just opened the jade bottle, and then casually poured out a dozen medicinal pills from the jade bottle, poured them on the white cloth in front of him, stretched out his hand, and motioned for the other party to see. The traces of second-grade medicinal pills were very obvious, and the aura was also very pure. There seemed to be no problem. The other party probably also felt that Yang Chen's medicinal pills were cheap, so he didn't bargain, threw down a spiritual marrow, counted 10 chi cultivating pills, and then turned to leave. There was only one sentence between the two, and the next was all action, and a deal was reached. The guy who made the deal was also interesting, and Yang Chun liked it very much. It was originally a deal. Why make it so complicated? After putting away the spiritual marrow, Yang Chun continued to sit quietly, cultivating the three purities secret art while waiting for the customer to come. But this time, he didn't wait for long. Just a moment later, the guy who had just bought his 10 chi cultivating pills returned, squatted in front of him, and asked in a low voice, "How many of these medicinal pills do you have? I will buy them all." All of them. Yang Chun raised his head and saw a handsome face. He had never seen it before, but at first glance, it gave people a good feeling. He nodded and replied casually, "I have 550 pieces of spiritual marrow on hand for the time being." As he spoke, he took out 5 jade bottles and placed them on the white cloth. Without saying anything, the other party also took out 50 pieces of spiritual marrow, grabbed the jade bottle, and stood up. Before leaving, he suddenly said, "If there are more in the future, I will buy them all. I will go back and refine pills, and come back here after refining 500. Yang Chun didn't agree directly. He just smiled and said, "Whether you can meet it or not, it depends on your luck." The other party also nodded and didn't say anything more. He left the market directly. It seemed that he went straight to the immortal falling abyss. He came back just to replenish the medicinal pills and take a little rest. Although Jin Tao did not appear, he has been monitoring Yang Chen's actions with his spiritual awareness. Seeing that Yang Chen had gone to the market, he followed him for a while and found that Yang Chen had sold 50 pieces of spiritual marrow directly. He couldn't help but be surprised. Back in his room, Yang Chen did not hide it. He took out the profound spirit furnace and began to refine medicinal pills. Yang Chen could refine 100 chi nourishing pills in one furnace, and for the second-grade refining, it would take him 2 hours. After refining 5 furnaces, he began to do his daily homework. After swallowing a millennium profound yang fruit, he began to cultivate the yin-yang 5-element secret art. There was no day and night in the underground, and Yang Chun did not follow any time. After the cultivation, he went to the market to sell the second-grade Chi Dan. There were very few people in that corner, but there were always people who would see it. Those who saw it usually took a medicinal pill to try it, and then they would buy all of Yang Chen's medicinal pills. In this way, almost every 12 hours, about a day's time, Yang Chun could exchange medicinal pills for 50 pieces of spiritual marrow. For more than 10 days, Jin Tao, who had been monitoring Yang Chun, almost began to be jealous. He came here almost to get more than 3,000 pieces, but Yang Chun had already gotten hundreds of pieces in just 10 days, close to 1,000 pieces. Such a speed, how could it not make him salivate? This was also good. The more spiritual marrow Yang Chun earned, then when something happened to Yang Chun during the test, Jin Tao would get more spiritual marrow. Jin Tao secretly planned in his heart, but he did not act rashly. This kind of life lasted for more than 20 days. Only then did Yang Chun use up all the medicinal ingredients he had collected to refine the Chi Dan. In exchange, he had more than 1,300 pieces of spiritual marrow. Without medicinal ingredients, Yang Chun finally decided to make a trip to the immortal falling abyss. After a little preparation, Yang Chun directly found Jin Tao and asked him to arrange the test. Jin Tao sneered in his heart and brought Yang Chun to the trial field. After pretending to give Yang Chun some pointers, he pushed Yang Chun into the trial field, then controlled the trial field's formation and opened a restriction on the underground spirit beast. Then, Jin Tao waited patiently outside the training grounds, as long as Yang Chun died inside, and then Jin Tao unknowingly replaced the jade slip. The spiritual essence in Yang Chen's Chinquan bag would be in Jin Tao's pocket. This was an unexpected surprise. Originally, he only wanted to thoroughly teach Yang Chen a lesson. Now that he had more than 1,000 pieces of spiritual marrow, he would be lying if he said he was not happy. More than 1,000 pieces of spiritual marrow was something that Jin Tao could collect in a year. As for Yang Chen being accidentally killed by the underground spirit beast, this was too normal. Even Foundation Establishment Stage and Golden Core Stage experts could be killed by the underground spirit beasts if they were not careful in the Immortal Fallen Abyss. It was normal for a Qi Condensation Junior to die, who told him to overestimate himself and challenge a high-level underground spirit beast at the early stage of Qi condensation. He deserved to die. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame the person who gave him the token. He clearly knew that Yang Chen's cultivation was low, yet he still sent him to the Immortal Falling Abyss. That was sending Yang Chen to his death. Who knew that Jin Tao didn't give Yang Chen the complete information on the underground spirit beasts. Furthermore, Jin Tao should have released the 5 high-level spirit beasts one by one, but Jin Tao released all 5 high-level spirit beasts at once. Even if he was at the peak of Foundation establishment, it would take him at least a few days and nights of attrition to kill 5 high-level spirit beasts at once. Sometimes, encountering spirit beasts that restrained him was the most tragic thing in the Immortal Falling Abyss. The only thing that Jin Tao wasn't sure about was how long it would take for Yang Chen to deal with 5 high-level spirit beasts at once. 5 breaths? 10 breaths? The trial field's formation was its own system, so no matter what happened inside, it wouldn't disturb the villagers. Jin Tao was confidently and boldly waiting for the bad news to happen in the trial field. When he was fantasizing about the large amount of spirit essence coming in, the trial field behind him made a sound, the formation opened, and Yang Chen slowly walked out from inside. Its 5 metal attribute spirit beasts, which just so happens to be restrained by my fire attribute. Yang Chen had a relaxed smile on his face, without the slightest trace of exhaustion. He smiled and cupped his hands at Jin Tao. Thank you, Senior Jin, for taking care of me and allowing me to enter the Immortal Falling Abyss earlier. Thank you very much. At that moment, Jin Tao's expression was extremely interesting. It was as if he had given the other party a large sum of money just as he was about to collect a debt. The expression of disbelief and disbelief was all concentrated on his face. Looking at Yang Chen's smile, Jin Tao even had a feeling of wanting to cry. Chapter 117. All of them were metal attribute, low-level spirit beasts. Jin Tao was so depressed that he wanted to cry. He had clearly arranged for 5 high-level spirit beasts. So how did they end up as low-level spirit beasts? And they were all metal attribute spirit beasts that were restrained by Yang Chen's fire attribute. He wanted to make sure that Yang Chen didn't pass. But restarting the trial by himself would inevitably attract the attention of others, and he might be the one to be exposed. Jin Tao didn't dare let his actions be exposed, so he had to make up for it. Junior Brother Yang's luck is really good, Jin Tao said with a congratulatory expression, then pretended to say casually, the test has been passed, so Junior Brother Yang can enter Immortal Falling Abyss at any time. However, Junior Brother has to return the Jade Slip with the introduction to the underground spirit beasts. The next person who enters will have to learn it. Yang Chen glanced at Jin Tao with a smile, then reached into his Cosmos bag and took out the Jade Slip. He said in a profound manner, Senior Brother Jin, you must keep it safe. If you accidentally lose any of its contents, it will be troublesome. Jin Tao's heart jumped, and he almost couldn't help but attack Yang Chen. He finally remembered where he was in time and forcefully suppressed his desire to attack. He didn't dare to look at Yang Chen again, afraid that he would make a big mistake on impulse. Hey, this is the end of the skill. It's not worth a mention. Yang Chun shook his head, sneered, stared at Jin Tao, and turned to leave. The moment he was stared at by Yang Chun, Jin Tao's body suddenly trembled, and he was drenched in sweat, as if he had experienced life or death. Yang Chun's eyes seemed to carry the light of death. He saw through everything and completely strangled Jin Tao's thoughts of attacking him in the cradle. A peak foundation establishment cultivator wants to condense a core? Dream on. Far away, Yang Chun left an unusually disdainful evaluation and completely disappeared in the perception of Jin Tao's spiritual awareness. Even with Jin Tao's ability, he didn't know how Yang Chun disappeared. Jin Tao, who had wanted to struggle when he heard Yang Chun's last sentence, was shocked once again. Yang Chun's words were like knives and axes, deeply engraving in his mind. His mind was filled with Yang Chun's disdainful dream on. All of a sudden, Jin Tao felt disheartened. He could no longer muster up the courage to work hard. It was as if he was only left with a shell. His mind was empty, leaving only regret. At this time, Jin Tao began to ponder over the strangeness of this matter. If Yang Chun was just a junior in the qi refining stage, how could the token that should be in the hands of the head of the palace in Chunyang Palace fall into the hands of Yang Chun? Could it be that the eyesight of the master of Chunyang Palace, who had reached the profound Yuanying realm, was not as good as that of Jin Tao? Since he had made such arrangements, Jin Tao should have known that he couldn't act on impulse. But at that time, Jin Tao didn't know why he was possessed. As soon as he heard the name of Yang Chun, he wanted to suppress and subdue him, and completely ignored these things. Now that he thought about it, Jin Tao regretted it so much that his intestines were almost green. His mind was full of frustration, countless regrets and questions, and his whole body was only disheartened. Yes, he couldn't even see such a simple thing. How could he condense the Dan? Yang Chun's sentence "dream on" once again hit Jin Tao's heart hard. Jin Tao just sat there, silly. What Yang Chun used was a small means to shock the mind. There were several simple spells in the 3 purities secret art, one of which was the God-shaking technique. It was said to be a small means, but it was for the level of the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. In this world, it was definitely a unique skill among the unique skills. The God-shaking technique was usually used when the target was discouraged to remind the other party not to relax, and it had the same effect as a severe warning. However, in Jin Tao's case, Yang Chun did the opposite. Directly when he did something wrong and felt guilty, he took advantage of it and destroyed his confidence in one fell swoop. It was equivalent to planting a heart demon in Jin Tao's mind. As long as he cultivated, this depressed thought would appear. Yang Chun's spiritual awareness cultivation base was higher than Jin Tao's by a great realm. And in this world, Yang Chun had not seen anyone who could resist the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord's unique skill. Therefore, Yang Chun succeeded in one fell swoop. Jin Tao, however, had no idea that he had been calculated by Yang Chun. He was just immersed in remorse and kept reviewing himself. Perhaps in his previous life, Yang Chun would only admit that he was unlucky, admit that he failed, and then cultivate again. But in this life, Yang Chun would not let go of anyone who had the intention to kill him. As for Jin Tao, Yang Chun did not consider him for the time being. A guy who was haunted by a heart demon, unless there was a powerful expert who discovered his state and spent his cultivation base to solve it for him. Jin Tao could only maintain this state. A guy who had completely lost his confidence in cultivation, no matter how high his cultivation base was already a waste among cultivators. This ending was even worse than death. Maybe Jin Tao would have his chance to crack Yang Chun's God-shaking technique. However, Yang Chun believed that when he saw Jin Tao next time, even if it was face-to-face, Yang Chun could kill Jin Tao. In the immortal falling abyss, Yang Chun had such confidence. Yang Chun had discovered that the killing intent of the immortal beheading stage required Yang Chun to kill continuously in order to gain recognition. In the illusion of the heaven stairway, Yang Chun only integrated a small part, which was just enough to stimulate the will of the immortal beheading stage by killing the underground spirit beasts in the immortal falling abyss. Yang Chun believed that as long as he could fully integrate the will of the immortal beheading stage, his strength would take a qualitative leap. There wasn't much light outside of Liluo village. It was pitch black everywhere. The reason why the immortal falling abyss was so named was because cultivators could die here if they were not careful. In absolute darkness, if they were surrounded by a large number of underground spirit beasts, unless they were at the nascent soul stage, they would die. Because there were many people living near the village, there were relatively few underground spirit beasts. Yang Chun walked out from this side, and with the help of the weak light from Fallen Village, Yang Chun began to calculate his location. That guy from the Heavenly Court had only told Yang Chun a rough area. So Yang Chun had to rely on his memory and direction to determine his position. Very soon, Yang Chun found his direction and walked towards the darkness. Not long after Yang Chun left Fallen Village, someone rushed to the corner of the market where Yang Chun usually set up his stall. The person looked at the empty ground and suddenly shouted, "Where did the pill refiner who refined the second revolution pill go?" His shout immediately caused an uproar in the entire marketplace. Second grade pill refiner? Where is he? Where is it? Countless people began to rush over. Chapter 118. Life in the immortal falling abyss was very dull. In order to obtain enough spiritual essence, apart from resting and replenishing supplies, one basically had to fight in the immortal falling abyss. Most of the time, those who could persist in such a dull and long battle were battle maniacs. Pill refiners and pill refiners who focused on refining pills and tools were often not very good at fighting. Thus, very few of them would come to the immortal falling abyss. Any battle required the use of spiritual energy and weapons, but it was inevitable that one would get injured and damage their magic treasures. Under normal circumstances, even a battle maniac would be able to refine some first-grade medicinal pills for healing or restoring spiritual power. However, second-grade medicinal pills were something that these people would never be able to reach. The rank of a pill refiner, apart from the high grade of pills they could refine, was most importantly the rank of the pill. No matter how low their cultivation was, a second-grade pill refiner would have a better future than an ordinary pill refiner. To be able to meet a second-grade pill refiner in the immortal falling abyss was simply a stroke of great luck. Looking at the position of the person who spoke, everyone vaguely remembered that there was a young man selling pills here a few days ago. However, everyone did not think that a chi condensation young man could have anything good, so most of them just swept past him with their divine senses without stopping. Now that someone had revealed that he was a second-grade pill refiner, countless people immediately began to regret their actions. A chi condensation cultivator was a second-grade pill refiner. So what grade would he reach after reaching foundation establishment and condensing his core? Such a person had been right under their noses for more than 10 days, yet no one had paid any attention to him. Fortunately, this was the immortal falling abyss. That young man had come here to train and would eventually return to Fallen Village. From this moment onwards, no one occupied that corner in the market square. Everyone consciously vacated that spot and waited for the chi condensation young man to return so that they could form a good relationship with him. As long as they could befriend that pill refiner, it would be a great opportunity for them in the future. Yang Chun did not know what happened in Fallen Village. He only set off towards his destination after confirming the direction. Soon, he encountered an underground spirit beast. Boom! Those who could get close to Fallen Village were basically fish that had escaped the net. They were not powerful people. Under the double protection of Yang Chen's Yin-Yang Reversal 5 elements, the attack could not hurt Yang Chun at all. Yang Chun, on the other hand, only defended himself to his heart's content. He didn't attack at all. Strictly speaking, the underground spirit beast was not a living creature. It was just a mass of spiritual energy with spiritual intelligence. To launch an attack was to release the spiritual energy in one's body. It was true that attacking could eliminate the underground spirit beasts, but when the underground spirit beast's spiritual energy was exhausted, they would usually obtain more spiritual marrow than killing the spirit beasts. In less than a quarter of an hour, the underground spirit beast's spiritual chi was exhausted, and it shrunk into a ball of spiritual marrow and fell to the ground. Putting away the spirit marrow, Zhang Xian walked forward for a short distance before he heard the intense sounds of battle. At the same time, he could also hear the roars of over 100 spirit beasts. A human figure was besieged by hundreds of underground spirit beasts. A shield that was emitting a blue light danced up and down, almost enveloping the figure entirely. On the periphery, a flying sword was flickering nonstop as it attacked a spirit beast that was constantly changing its position. A single attribute or two of the 5 elements was such a tragedy. When a large number of underground spirit beasts swarmed over, there was no better way to defend oneself and then find a spirit beast that countered one's attribute to attack. Every time an underground spirit beast was destroyed, it would take at least half a day. Most of the time, a person could only obtain spiritual marrow of one attribute and then exchange it with others. Even a simple formation cultivator would be at a loss when faced with the underground spirit beasts. Underground spirit beasts were condensed from spiritual energy, so spiritual energy array attacks had no effect on spiritual energy. Only this kind of solid attack would be effective unless a soar array was used. However, most people who went to the Immortal Falling Abyss were mid-stage foundation establishment cultivators who spent 10 years to increase the density of spiritual energy in their cave abodes. How many of them had a sword array? Yang Chen did not stop. Instead, he made a small detour and rushed into an even darker depths. Yang Chen's actions made the person in the encirclement turn pale with fright. He had already discovered Yang Chen's arrival with his divine sense, but very few people in the Immortal Falling Abyss would make a move, so he didn't take it to heart. He only thought that it was a little guy who had come to pick up scraps. When he saw that Yang Chen had rushed deeper into the abyss, the person couldn't help but exclaim, "It's dangerous inside. Be careful." Unfortunately, he was surrounded by spirit beasts and couldn't stop Yang Chen. "It's all right. Thank you, Senior." Yang Chen faintly thanked him, but his feet did not stop at all. He walked straight ahead, but in an instant, he was suddenly surrounded by a large group of spirit beasts in front of him and disappeared in the scope of the man's spiritual awareness exploration. What a pity! Surrounded by the spirit beasts, the man let out a sigh. "You're only at the chi condensation stage. How could you enter such a deep place?" However, he only sighed and his hands did not stop moving. How many cultivators had fallen in the Immortal Falling Abyss? It was all Yang Chen, no more, no less Yang Chen. If someone saw Yang Chen's current state, they would definitely scream in horror. Yang Chen didn't have any defensive magic treasures, but there were hundreds of underground spirit beasts around him, crazily attacking Yang Chen. However, Yang Chen didn't care at all. He just kept moving forward while using his divine sense to explore the surroundings. After walking for almost half a month in the outside world, he had already gone deep into the abyss filled with high-level spirit beasts. Yang Chen was sure that he was about to reach his destination. At this time, he was surrounded by high-level spirit beasts, and Yang Chen could only barely resist their attacks. Yang Chen had already used up a bottle of 100 chi nourishing pills. After all, there were hundreds of high-level spirit beasts around him, and the number was still increasing. If he didn't find a place, even with Yang Chen's strength, he wouldn't be able to hold on any longer. After all, the pills were limited, and he didn't have the time and opportunity to restore his spiritual power. At this point, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. His powerful divine sense covered a radius of tens of feet. Soon, Yang Chen found the terrain that the guy mentioned. There was a huge round stone standing like a landmark, as if to remind Yang Chen that he had found the place. Behind the round stone, there was a narrow gap that was just big enough for a person to get in. Yang Chen didn't dare to neglect. He quickly moved to the entrance under the attack of a group of underground spirit beasts and then struggled to get in. Chapter 119. When Yang Chen finally entered the hole that could only allow one underground spirit beast to squeeze in, he could finally take a thorough rest. He was only at the 3rd layer of chi refinement, so he still didn't have the ability to fly. After walking for half a month with hundreds of underground spirit beasts, Yang Chun was exhausted. A high-level spirit beast that looked like a wild boar was blocking the hole. It was stuck by the rocks on both sides, so it couldn't enter or leave. However, it blocked all the other spirit beasts outside. The space in the cave was very large, with a radius of 10 feet. Even if Yang Chun spread out and slept inside, it would still be fine. The most shocking thing was that there was an underground spirit vein that continuously flowed with spiritual qi. It was simply a natural place for cultivation. It was lucky that someone had found such a good place in his previous life. At the moment, Yang Chun did not neglect and directly placed the black jade futon at the exit of the underground spiritual vein. He sat on it and began to meditate. While restoring his spiritual power, he also warmed the meridians in his body. This time, it took Yang Chun 2 days and 2 nights to fully recover the consumption of half a month and the loss of his spiritual awareness brought by sleeplessness. With the abundant underground spirit vein, Yang Chun didn't need to use the powerful medicinal power of the profound yang fruit. He even placed the medicine garden's purifying bottle at the entrance of the spirit vein and slowly absorbed spiritual qi to replenish himself. The immortal fallen abyss was a huge underground hole. No one knew how wide it was. Even with Elder Wu Xiong's power, he still hadn't found the edge of the immortal fallen abyss. As for where these underground spirit beasts had appeared from, there was no clue. All he knew was that there seemed to be no end to these underground spirit beasts. They were constantly charging towards the only exit of Separation Village. The spirited Yang Chun had no intention of investigating these secrets. His main task now was to kill the underground spirit beasts and collect their spiritual essence. At the same time, he could increase his cultivation and fuse with the will of the immortal beheading stage. The yin and yang reversal 5 elements was like a high-speed millstone. When it was focused on an underground spiritual beast, the spiritual energy of the high-level underground spiritual beast would be drained very soon, leaving only a few glittering chalcedonies. As soon as the hole was empty, another underground spirit beast rushed in. It was also stuck and became a dead soul under Yang Chen's hands. At this point, Yang Chen no longer had to worry about his safety. A single spirit beast attack would not pose a threat to him. On the contrary, with sufficient spiritual power and a safe environment, he could fight the underground spirit beasts endlessly. If anyone in the immortal falling abyss saw the efficiency with which Yang Chun killed the underground spiritual beasts, they would be so shocked that their jaws would drop to the ground. When other people killed a spirit beast, they would at least have to protect themselves. Then, they would use their flying swords or magic treasures to chase and attack a spirit beast. If they could kill a spirit beast after spending half a day, it would already be a very good result. It must be known that this was the territory of the underground spirit beasts. The spiritual energy was abundant. Those injured spirit beasts that wandered could recover their injuries at any time. Under such circumstances, the situation of those disciples who came to the immortal falling abyss could almost be described as difficult. How could it be like Yang Chun? It was as easy as grabbing an underground spirit beast and sawing its neck with a small saw blade. His life was extremely regular, constantly killing the underground spirit beasts. After his spiritual power was exhausted, he would sit on the black jade futon to practice and replenish it. After practicing the yin and yang 5-element secret art once a day, he would practice the 3 purities secret art once a day to absorb the murderous aura caused by killing the underground spirit beasts and temper his spiritual awareness. Then, he used the universe treasure raising secret art to maintain his profound spirit furnace and sword sheath, and then he killed the underground spirit beasts again. In the merit ring, Yang Chun carried enough food and water, and even in order to make his life more colorful, Yang Chun also deliberately planted some vegetables and fruits in the medicine garden. Except that he could not leave here at will, all his life seemed very complete. The underground spirit beasts were almost endless. Yang Chun killed one, and one came, there was no possibility of killing them all. Within a short period of 6 months, Yang Chun almost killed tens of thousands of underground spirit beasts. The amount of spiritual essence he obtained, because of the cleverness of the killing methods and the high grade of the underground spirit beasts, far exceeded this number. Yang Chun now had almost 30 or 40,000 spiritual marrow in his hands. As long as he worked hard for a while, he could get 50,000 by himself. There was no reincarnation of day and night. Under this high-intensity practice, Yang Chun had even forgotten the time. When he used the only spiritual power in his body to kill an underground spirit beast, the entrance was blocked again, and then he returned to the black jade futon and began to cultivate and recover. After dozens of cycles, the spiritual power in his body was almost recovered, but there was no sign of stopping at all. There seemed to be a burst of pressure in the meridians, stretching and shrinking, as if expecting something, and the spiritual power began to accumulate in the meridians. Finally, the surging spiritual power seemed to be suddenly unable to continue to fill, and then began to compress, and soon it reached the extreme. Boom! A certain barrier in the meridians was suddenly broken, and the spiritual power was like a wild horse out of control, continuing to gallop in the body. His whole body was brimming with the feeling of power being released. Yang Chen knew that his spiritual power had once again reached the fourth layer of qi refining. His body seemed to have suddenly become empty. The original spiritual power was not enough to fill Yang Chen's body now. In the underground black jade praying mat, there was an endless stream of spiritual power, and it began to crazily fill the spiritual power emptiness brought about by the promotion of the level. From the third layer to the fourth layer, although it was only a small increase, this increase was a small qualitative change from the early stage to the middle stage of qi refining. This also meant that Yang Chun was no longer an early stage qi refining rookie, but a middle stage qi refining rookie. This was not an increase in the level of one type of spiritual power, but an increase in all 10 types of spiritual power of the yin-yang 5 elements art. The spirit vein in the immortal falling abyss was originally full of all attributes. Otherwise, it would not have been able to give birth to the 5 elemental spirit beasts. A huge amount of spiritual power began to frantically flow into Yang Chen's body, and under Yang Chen's deliberate guidance, the yin-yang 5 elements art began to circulate to its maximum limit and began to strengthen his internal organs. This was a process that must be experienced after entering the middle stage of qi refining. In fact, the entire qi refining stage was to strengthen one's body to the point that it could withstand even more powerful spiritual power and thus achieve the goal of foundation establishment. Yang Chen's body had already been strengthened by the life essence of countless immortals, but that kind of demonic technique was from the outside to the inside. Now it was from the inside to the outside. Under the cleansing of the huge amount of spiritual power, Yang Chun did not even care about the spirit beasts underground and began to concentrate on strengthening his body. Chapter 120. Consolidating one's realm was something everyone had to do after successfully advancing to the next realm. Even the whole process of consolidating is more important than the process of breaking through. It can be used to illustrate the contrast between the two. The process of breaking through is equivalent to hammering the roof of the tallest house you build into a spike, piercing the membrane of the next realm. However, consolidating the realm is to pierce the membrane and strengthen the needle into a huge foundation. The bigger and deeper the foundation, the higher the house can be built in the future. Yang Chun is now like a guy who is laying the foundation, madly absorbing the spiritual energy in the underground spirit vein, laying a solid foundation for himself. In the process of absorption, Yang Chun has to consider another problem. When he was in the early stage of qi refining, Yang Chen's own 5 elements were complete and balanced, so it didn't matter much. However, in the middle stage of qi refining, it was a bit shocking to maintain such a performance. In the future, he must deliberately highlight his own fire attribute cultivation base. Otherwise, it will definitely make a lot of people have a lot of associations. This time, consolidating the foundation and absorbing spiritual power took almost several times the time before it was completely completed. For Yang Chun, There's almost no interference in this place, and the spiritual power is abundant. It is impossible to have any accidents, smoothly consolidating the realm of the fourth layer of Qi refining. Level up. Yang Chun immediately began to impatiently take out a flying sword, trying to carry out the second sacrificial refining of the Celestial Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art. The Celestial Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art is definitely a good thing. It can let each of his own attributes of spiritual power produce a small celestial spirit formation. With this celestial spirit formation, whether it is attack or defense, it can be more powerful than ordinary attack and defense. Although he can only carry out the first sacrificial refining, but after his powerful spiritual awareness exploration and accurate judgment of his own strength, the power of spiritual power attack and defense is at least 30% higher than the original. In other words, only the first of the 36 spiritual power threads has such a powerful power. Then once the Celestial Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art, sacrificial refining to the 36th layer, how many times more powerful will it be? 10 times and 80%? The wish was beautiful, but the reality was cruel. Even though Yang Chun had entered the middle stage of the Qi refining stage, he still couldn't complete the second layer of the Heavenly Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art. In addition to successfully upgrading the first layer to the intermediate level, the second layer was always blocked after a while, unable to proceed. Left with no choice, Yang Chun could only stop trying bitterly. The Heavenly Spirit Treasure Refining Art did not work, so Yang Chun immediately turned to the Earth Fiend Sacrificial Formation Art. The 72 layers of Earthly Fiend Formation could also raise the quality of magic treasures. However, back then, Yang Chun's cultivation base was too low and he was unable to do it. Now that he had raised his cultivation base by 1 layer, he could give it a try. The result was unexpectedly good. Under the sacrificial refining of the Earth Fiend Sacrificial Formation Art, the Flying Sword successfully engraved the first layer of the Earthly Fiend Formation on the Flying Sword. However, the current Yang Chun was still a bit reluctant to carry out the first layer of the sacrificial refining. When it was completed, he was sweating all over, and the spiritual power of his whole body was exhausted. It even consumed the spiritual power of 1,000 years old profound Yang fruit of Yang Chun. This was the effect that Yang Chun had been sitting on the underground spiritual vein. However, although the process was hard, the achievement was crazy. The flying sword directly flashed with rays of treasure light. At a glance, one could tell that it was not an ordinary item. However, such a change made Yang Chun a little dumbfounded. The improvement of the magic treasure was a good thing, but this kind of sharpness was not what he liked now. Unfortunately, this was not under Yang Chun's control. Yang Chun knew that only when the Heavenly Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art and the Earth Fiend Sacrificial Formation Art were all sacrificial refined, the magic treasure that had been sacrificial refined would be restrained and become a real, peerless magic treasure. The changes of the Flying Sword certainly made Yang Chun happy, but the changes of the spiritual power in his body made Yang Chun even more ecstatic. As Yang Chun expected, when Yang Chun completed the first layer of the sacrificial refining of the Earth Fiend Sacrificial Formation Art, the spiritual power of each attribute in his body, after the previous division of the Heavenly Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art, was subdivided again. This time, it became 108 threads. The Heavenly Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art was still the Heavenly Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art, but there was also an Earth Fiend formation. It was just that the two formations did not affect each other and existed independently. They could not be completely integrated into a complete Heavenly Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art. But even so, the changes in his body were enough to make Yang Chun ecstatic. He immediately began to replenish his spiritual power, and then the first thing he did was to test his attack power. The unlucky underground spirit beast that was stuck at the entrance of the cave became the most pitiful test subject. It could not move and could only watch as Yang Chun's attack fell on its body. Then, after being hit a dozen times in a row, it died, leaving behind 2 spiritual essence. According to Yang Chun's original method of killing high-level spirit beasts, there would be 5 spiritual essence left, but now there were only 2. After a few attacks, Yang Chen knew how much his attack power had increased. Like the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art, each layer increased the power by 30%. According to this calculation, if he could completely sacrificial refine the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art, he could at least increase the power by 324%, which was close to 32 times of Yang Chen's without sacrificial refining. This was only the completion of the sacrificial refining of the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. If it could be combined into a complete heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art, there would definitely be a bigger surprise. Yang Chen, who has 10,000 years of cultivation experience in his previous life, naturally knows the truth that more haste, less speed. Anyway, it was already a surprise to have such an effect now, and Yang Chen would not be greedy for too much. However, after full preparation, the profound spirit furnace and the sword box were taken out separately, and the first sacrificial refining of the Earth Fiend sacrificial formation secret art was carried out. With the experience of the first sacrificial refining of the flying sword, the sacrificial refining of the profound spirit furnace, and the flying sword was very smooth, and it was not as hard as the first sacrificial refining, but the effect was better than the first sacrificial refining of the flying sword with the Earth Fiend sacrificial formation secret art. After the completion of the sword box, Yang Chen also began a new way to kill the spirit beast. Anyway, Yang Chen has already accumulated 50,000 spiritual essence, enough for his own Immortal's cave to use in the future. Obtaining the spiritual essence is no longer the first goal of Yang Chen. What Yang Chen has to do now is to kill the underground spirit beast by beheading it. This method is most in line with the Immortal beheading method in the Immortal beheading stage, and it can also stimulate the will of the Immortal beheading stage to integrate with himself. At the moment, Yang Chen didn't waste time. He waved the sword box in the shape of the Immortal beheading stage, raised it high, and slashed it down, and began his new round of killing the underground spirit beast. With a sharp weapon in hand, the efficiency was higher than the barehanded attack. With just 3 knives, Yang Chen cut off the head of the underground spirit beast stuck in the hole. Chapter 121. Yang Chen was still unable to use the flying sword to kill through the air. It couldn't be helped, his level was too low. Even though he had entered the 4th layer of Qi training, the flying sword technique could still only last a few strikes. Any more, and his spiritual power would be exhausted. Using the flying sword technique to kill the underground spirit beast was powerful and fast. Unfortunately, before killing 3, he had to sit down and recover his spiritual power. Yang Chen didn't need to break through his spiritual power, but to integrate the killing intent of the Immortal beheading platform as soon as possible, so he didn't need to use this method. Holding the sword box in the shape of the Immortal beheading sword in his hand, the underground spirit beasts rushed in crazily and were stuck. It was the same posture as when Yang Chen was beheading in the execution field. Using the most familiar posture, Yang Chen slashed down again and again, 3 slashes for 1 spirit beast. After killing a spirit beast, there would immediately be a follow-up spirit beast rushing in to replace it, almost without stopping. The Yin-Yang 5 elemental secret art, under the effect of the Immortal beheading sword, cut into the body of the underground spirit beast. No matter what kind of spirit beast it was, the spiritual power in its body would be exhausted in a few slashes. Yang Chen could easily cut off the head of the spirit beast. Even if it wasn't a highly intelligent creature, the underground spirit beast had, after all, developed a spiritual sense. Every knife cut down, there was a feeling of Yang Chen killing a creature. In the same way, the killing intent in his body was also a bit more, and the murderous aura on his body was also a bit more. The will of the Immortal beheading platform was the most direct manifestation of killing. When Yang Chen felt completely in sync with the Immortal beheading platform, the fierce will also rushed out of Yang Chen's body and began to integrate with Yang Chen's killing intent. Every time he killed a spirit beast, Yang Chen seemed to be able to feel that there was something more in his temperament. It was like an executioner not asking for the reason, not asking for the result, just the kind of decisive cut with a knife. As for Yang Chun himself, it seemed that he had become a bit more aggressive. The crazy killing intent even frightened the underground spirit beasts outside, and they no longer dared to enter. Every time at this time, Yang Chun had to stop and restore his spiritual power while using the three purities secret art to completely absorb his almost overflowing killing intent. His daily life had become a cycle of killing and cultivation. It was dull and boring, and there was not even the slightest thrill or excitement. He could even kill tens of thousands of underground spirit beasts in a day. Sometimes, Yang Chun even wondered if he should rush out into the underground spiritual beasts and risk his life to vent his anger. However, the calmness he had cultivated in his past life for 10,000 years made him restrain himself. What he needed right now was not to vent his anger, but to steadily increase his strength, hide some of the monstrous performances in the eyes of others, and then be able to become a disciple of his master again. Compared to this goal, everything else was not worth mentioning. Thinking of his master's eyes, Yang Chun couldn't help but cheer up again. It was another long period of killing. Yang Chun didn't know how long it had been. Anyway, he could feel that the will of the immortal executioner stage in his body, after experiencing the killing of millions of underground spirit beasts, was finally completely stimulated. Boom, like a god of death in the immortal falling abyss, suddenly flashed endless killing intent. The people in the entire immortal falling abyss seemed to feel this terrifying will. The will that could make the Jade Emperor tremble in fear directly scared all the creatures in the immortal falling abyss into fainting. Even the masters of the Yuanying and Deshang stages were no exception. The only one who could stand soberly was Yang Chun. In the place close to Yang Chun, the underground spirit beasts that only knew how to act by instinct were directly attacked by the killing intent. Within a radius of tens of feet, it was originally crowded with spirit beasts, but now there was only a large piece of spirit marrow left, and there was nothing else. This was not the kind of killing intent that Yang Chun had when he first came out of the Immortal Executioner stage, but the crazy killing intent that the Immortal Executioner stage had accumulated from the creatures it had killed since its existence. The fierce beast imprisoned in Yang Chun's body finally released its boundless pressure and began to completely integrate with Yang Chun. The spiritual power in Yang Chun's body seemed to be driven by a great force and began to circulate at a high speed in his body. His body seemed to have become a huge black hole, crazily absorbing the spiritual power of the underground spirit vein. The speed at which the spiritual power was pouring in even made Yang Chun feel a burst of fear. Fortunately, the Yin and Yang reversal 5 elements could effectively refine spiritual power, so Yang Chun's body did not explode from the sudden influx of spiritual power. The spiritual power of the Heavenly Spirit Treasure Refining Secret Art and the Earth Fiend Sacrificial Formation Secret Art, driven by the killing intent, began to grow wildly. And the killing intent once again began to go crazy in Yang Chun's mind. Obey me! Obey me! With the experience in the Immortal Executioner stage, Yang Chun was able to deal with it easily. In his mind, the eyes of his master in his previous life flashed, and the happy scene of his master giving him the bright ray sword. Yang Chun's face even showed a smile again. I've said many times, I am the executioner. In the face of the will of the Immortal Executioner stage, Yang Chun just smiled, firm and unwavering, letting the will of the Immortal Executioner stage be stimulated by his killing intent in the outside world to the final madness. Soon, unable to subdue Yang Chun, the will of the Immortal Executioner stage could only choose to be subdued by Yang Chun. Bit by bit, it began to completely integrate into Yang Chun's mind, becoming a part of Yang Chun. The familiar dark red aura once again appeared around Yang Chun's body, and the red and black blood mist was very eye-catching under the illumination of the night pearl. When all the killing intent completely integrated into Yang Chun, there was a bang, and the spiritual power in Yang Chun's body changed dramatically again. Originally, he had already entered the fourth qi refining layer, and with the unique cultivation environment, coupled with these days of nonstop cultivation, Yang Chen's cultivation had already accumulated enough. The killing intent stimulated the spiritual power, and it immediately rose again, quickly entering the fifth qi refining layer. During the process of merging with the killing intent, the bottleneck of the fifth qi refining layer was once again broken through. Under the crazy driving of the killing intent, the spiritual power crazily climbed. In the blink of an eye, it broke through the sixth qi refining layer and rushed into the seventh qi refining layer. Only after breaking through the seventh qi refining layer did the crazy spiritual power slowly calm down, and it was no longer as violent as it was before. Just breaking through 3 levels of checkpoints in a row even made Yang Chen's meridians have some severe pain. At this moment, Yang Chen couldn't care about anything else, and immediately rushed to the black jade praying mat and began to repair his meridians and consolidate his cultivation. Elder Wu Xiong, who was in charge of the falling immortal abyss, was the first to wake up, but he had been unconscious for a full day and night. But when he woke up, he found that a biting cold killing intent filled the air. The killing intent was so strong that even Elder Wu Xiong felt fear from the bottom of his heart. He wanted to check it out, but he discovered that under the suppression of this killing intent, he couldn't even move a muscle. Chapter 122. Immortal Falling Abyss. Is it going to be an earth-shaking disaster? Elder Wu Xiong did not dare to make a judgment. He could only feel the killing intent pervading everywhere. He could only hold on, but there was nothing he could do. In Yang Chen's plan, he would build the foundation within 10 years and improve 1 level a year on average, so that he would not appear to be an evildoer. At the same time, he was also a rare genius in refining qi and could be valued by the sect. However, after climbing to the top of the heaven stairway, Yang Chen knew that the sect had attached great importance to it. Naturally, there was not much meaning in hiding it. In terms of cultivation, Yang Chen also began to let nature take its course, but he did not expect that in order to integrate the killing intent of the immortal beheading stage in the immortal falling abyss, he could be stimulated by the killing intent to upgrade 3 levels in a row, directly from the 4th level of the intermediate qi refining stage to the 7th level of the advanced qi refining stage. Counting the days, it was only a year and he had upgraded 3 levels. This speed, even if it was a genius, was a bit shocking. It took Yang Chen a full 10 days to consolidate his realm and repair the damage to his meridians. During this time, the thick killing intent had been permeating around his body. Among the creatures in the immortal falling abyss, only Yang Chen and Elder Wu Xiong, who woke up later, were awake. Yang Chen knew the scourge of the killing intent outside his body. After consolidating his realm, he hurriedly began to cultivate the 3 purities secret art. The 2nd level of the 3 purities secret art was unparalleled in terms of absorbing the killing intent. It only took less than 6 hours to absorb all the bloody mist that covered a radius of dozens of feet. This was the killing intent accumulated by the immortal beheading stage. It was not known how many immortals had been killed by the immortal beheading stage. It was completely transformed into Yang Chen's spiritual awareness. In the process of transformation, Yang Chen felt his spiritual awareness surging and even had a feeling of disbelief. Originally, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness had already reached the peak of the foundation stage, and now was still rising, accumulating, and beginning to hit the barrier of the Jidan stage. Even if it was a knowledgeable person, it was impossible to believe that Yang Chen was now a disciple of the qi refining stage, but his spiritual awareness had already reached the realm of the Jidan stage. Boom! Under the continuous impact of the divine sense, a sudden roar sounded in Yang Chen's mind. Then, Yang Chen felt his whole body shake, as if he had suddenly appeared in a bloody world. Yang Chen knew that this was the sea of consciousness that was opened after his spiritual sense entered the golden core realm. Generally speaking, as long as one sea of consciousness was opened, then one would truly have the hope of condensing a core. However, After Yang Chun absorbed the will of the Immortal slaying platform, he directly took this step. Originally, the Three Purities secret art was the role of condensing the spiritual awareness and expanding the sea of consciousness. Now that the sea of consciousness has been successfully opened, but the killing intent has not yet been absorbed. Continue to absorb and refine, and in Yang Chen's sea of consciousness, it also began to change slowly. The bloody world was filled with smoke, as if all the killing intent outside his body was concentrated here. But very quickly, the blood-colored mist began to slowly gather, then converged into a blood-colored river, and began to flow on the blood-colored ground. The entire sea of consciousness also began to slowly fade, and it seemed that all the blood color began to converge in the river. In the empty sea of consciousness, there was only such a bloody river formed, and there was no other scenery. But Yang Chun was already ecstatic. In his previous life, when he had just formed the sea of knowledge, it was just a white mist as small as a shabby room. How could he open up such a huge sea of knowledge with a blood-red river in one go? The Three Purities secret art was the Three Purities secret art. At this time, Yang Chen also had to sigh at the strength of the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord's cultivation method. It was just strange. How could such a powerful Tao ancestor be captured by the profound heaven sect and sent to the Immortal slaying platform? This strange sea of consciousness, Yang Chen knew that this was the initial stage of the Tai Ching realm, the lowest of the three realms of the sea of consciousness of the Three Purities secret art. This was just the opening of the sea of consciousness. There was still a long way to go from the real Tai Ching realm. But since there was this good start, does Yang Chun still need to worry about his future cultivation? With a long breath of satisfaction, the spiritual awareness withdrew from the sea of consciousness, and Yang Chun also completely woke up. This time, the integration of the will of the Immortal slaying platform was simply a surprise. At this point, the killing intent that pervaded the Immortal falling abyss was swept away. Without the explosive killing intent, the creatures in the Immortal falling abyss slowly woke up. Those with high cultivation bases, when they woke up, they found that there were hundreds of unconscious spirit beasts around, and they were overjoyed. No matter what, they had to kill these spirit beasts that came to their door and take the spirit marrow. Fortunately, those who could enter the Immortal falling abyss were basically approved by the heads of the various sects, so they couldn't find anything. Although the time to wake up was fast and slow, after all, it was still faster than the underground spirit beasts. Otherwise, the Immortal falling abyss would have lost more than half of the trial disciples today. Even so, no one knew why they were unconscious, and even Elder Wu Xiong, who had been guarding the Immortal falling abyss all this time, didn't know the reason. The disciples who woke up only knew to take the spirit marrow first. Yang Chun was also no exception. He completely released his spiritual awareness, and the scene within a few hundred feet around him was clear at a glance. There were scattered spirit marrow and unconscious underground spirit beasts everywhere. Of course, Yang Chun wouldn't let this opportunity go. He directly rushed out of the cave, and then first cleaned up the surroundings, wantonly plundering at least 10,000 pieces of spirit marrow. Only then did he happily return to the cave, find a spirit beast to plug the cave entrance, and then began to examine the changes in his body again. Yang Chun could accurately judge the 7th stage of qi refining, but the current qi refining 7th stage was completely different from the qi refining 7th stage of his previous life. With the powerful yin-yang 5-element secret art, the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art, and the earth fiend formation art, the current Yang Chun could beat tens of Yang Chun of the same level from his previous life. Almost out of habit, Yang Chun took out a flying sword from the sword case and began to refine it. The heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art passed the 2nd stage of the sacrificial refining almost without any hindrance. In just 2 hours, the flying sword quickly improved by a grade. The sword body was shining brightly, very pleasing. Similarly, the earth fiend formation art passed the 2nd stage without any hindrance, and even rushed to the 3rd stage. Among the spirit power threads in his body, the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art had a trace of light, and the Earth Fiend formation art also had 2 more traces. Moreover, what made Yang Chun pleasantly surprised was that the spirit power threads, which were originally as thin as silk, had now become as thick as a thin needle, becoming more and more condensed. In front of Yang Chen's eyes, the beautiful eyes of his master from his previous life flashed, and in an instant, it turned into his master's smiling face. Yang Chun, this bright ray sword is specially refined by me for you. You take it and diligently practice. The slender jade finger in Yang Chen's mind was constantly enlarged, and gradually filled all of Yang Chen's memories. Master, I will soon be able to build the foundation, and soon I can return to your side and become your disciple. Chapter 123. The profound spirit furnace was a magic weapon that Yang Chun cared about the most. This was a good thing that could be used in the immortal world in the future. Yang Chun would definitely take good care of it. Of course, the celestial spirit treasure refining secret art would not be missed. It could improve the grade of the profound spirit furnace. This kind of good thing, Yang Chun would never neglect the profound spirit furnace. Under the control of Yang Chun, the majestic spiritual power was sacrificially refined inside and outside the profound spirit furnace. Yang Chun's sacrificial refining was very attentive, and even the defects in the profound spirit furnace could be clearly explored with spiritual awareness. With the relationship of recognizing the owner and sacrificial refining, Yang Chen's powerful spiritual awareness, which was already comparable to the middle Jidan stage, directly penetrated the interior of the profound spirit furnace and saw the structure and defects inside clearly. Although the sacrificial refining of the celestial spirit treasure refining secret art was very successful, Yang Chun still felt that there were some shortcomings in the ointment. The level of the fire attribute spiritual power was too low, and there was no suitable fire seed and materials. Some of the defects that could be obviously seen could not be made up, which made Yang Chun very regretful. It seemed that it was necessary to focus on improving his own fire attribute spiritual power. Yang Chun was originally a fire attribute innate spirit root. His previous realm was low, and he had already declared that in order to understand the characteristics of other attributes, he had been in contact with all 5 elements. But now that the level of refining qi was getting higher, Yang Chun also had to consider that he had to highlight his own fire attribute cultivation base. Otherwise, he would definitely let countless guys look sideways. There was a good opportunity at the moment. Yang Chun knew that in this immortal fallen abyss, there was an underground fire vein. The earth core fire was the Yin fire, 4th fire, that was needed for alchemy. After collecting it, not only could the profound spirit furnace be upgraded again, but Yang Chen's fire attribute cultivation base would also be more outstanding. After the celestial spirit treasure refining secret art, it was the Earth Fiend sacrificial formation secret art, which was followed by the universe treasure raising secret art. The luxurious sacrificial refining method and the luxurious maintenance technique, not to mention the same level of magic weapon, even if it was a higher grade magic weapon than the profound spirit furnace. If the magic weapon had a spirit, it was estimated that it would be dwarfed and overshadowed. After refining the sword case in the same way, Yang Chun reached out and took out the purified bottle from the Xianyang Mountain Her Garden that had absorbed all the spiritual power. The earth flame was in the other direction of Separation Village. It was time to leave. However, when Yang Chun was about to receive the purified bottle, he was taken aback. The medicinal garden bottle and bottle cap were originally very high-level magical weapons. With Yang Chun's current level, before he reached the foundation establishment stage, Yang Chun didn't even think about sacrificially refining them. Even if he had the heavenly spirit treasure refining art and the earth fiend sacrificial formation art, it was still the same. Now that the medicine garden was only marked by Yang Chun's spiritual consciousness, it would no longer harm Yang Chun. Originally, in Xianyang Mountain, the medicine garden's purified bottle only had a thin trace of spiritual power left. When collecting the senior sword case, the purified bottle completely absorbed the small underground spiritual vein, but it only added a layer as thick as a finger. But now, The purified bottle had absorbed full of spiritual power. The whole purified bottle exuded a soul-stirring aqua blue color. Holding in his hand, it was like a crystal clear ice cube. Not only that, but the lid of the purified bottle also seemed to be full of spiritual power, emitting a burst of golden light. This change was unexpected for Yang Chun. He originally thought that the bottle cap used the spiritual power of the purified bottle, but now he discovered that it could be separated separately. Obviously, just by looking at the color, it could be seen that the sword array of the bottle cap was of the metal attribute. This was an unexpected surprise. At the very least, Yang Chun wouldn't have to worry about the spiritual power of the medicine garden for decades, or even hundreds of years. In the future, as long as he could sacrificial refine it, he might be able to let the medicine garden absorb a variety of spiritual objects of the 5 elements and form a 5-element world in the medicine garden. At that time, he could not only cultivate the medicinal herbs planted in the medicine garden now. There was no time limit for cultivation. When he really ascended, he would have fresh medicinal herbs that were hundreds or thousands of years old. Naturally, he would have a great advantage. The underground spirit vein that was full of spiritual power had been frantically absorbed by Yang Chun over the past 2 years. In addition to the absorption of the purified bottle in the medicine garden, it was now much weaker. However, the immortal fall abyss was underground, so it would naturally recover slowly. Yang Chun didn't realize that he had taken advantage of the fellow Taoist who had discovered this place later. He reluctantly used the light of the pearl in his hand to take one last look at this place that seemed like a cheat. Then, he left without any reluctance. The direction of Separation Village could be found through the reaction of the pearl in his hand. Apart from emitting light, the pearl could also guide the people who came here to train back to Separation Village. As long as they followed the direction marked on the pearl, they could easily reach their destination. As he walked, Yang Chun counted the spiritual essence he had obtained. These days, he had been either killing or cultivating day and night, so Yang Chun hadn't had the chance to count his spoils of war. With this number, Yang Chun himself was almost shocked. After killing millions of underground spirit beasts, Yang Chun actually had tens of millions of spiritual essence in his hands. What did tens of millions of spiritual essence mean? 50,000 pieces of 5-element spiritual essence could increase the speed of spiritual qi gushing out by about 1 unit. This speed of spiritual qi gushing out was equivalent to 1% of the speed of spiritual qi gushing out of the spirit vein in Chunyang Palace on Meiqing Mountain. Even if there were only 10 million pieces of spiritual essence, it was equivalent to expanding the spirit vein by 200 units. This meant that the current exit of the spirit vein in Chunyang Palace could be expanded by 2 times. This also meant that the concentration of spiritual power in Meiqing Mountain would be 2 times stronger than before, which was 3 times stronger than before. After this trip, if Yang Chun took out all the spiritual essence, it could almost be said that Chunyang Palace would be able to turn around immediately. The foundation of a sect was indispensable. Now, Yang Chun could almost improve the land of Chunyang Palace by 2 levels almost by himself. Everyone knew what the effect would be if a person from a sect occupied the spiritual power resources of 3 sections. Even a disciple at the peak of Foundation Establishment realm could not get so much spiritual essence after staying in the Luo Abyss for 10 years. That was to say, Yang Chun found such a cheat-like way. He slightly converted the bloody scene in his sea of consciousness into a little killing intent and spread it around his body. None of the underground spirit beasts dared to approach him. After killing millions of underground spirit beasts, Yang Chun naturally had a kind of oppressive aura like a natural enemy to these underground spirit beasts. None of the spirit beasts dared to take the initiative to approach him. Originally, it took him less than 7 days to walk against the spirit beasts for half a month. He felt that Li Luo village was already about a day's journey away. Suddenly, the ground in front of him lit up with a pearl light. This was the pearl light given by Li Luo village, which was the same as the pearl light given by Yang Chun. A person's voice almost instantly reached Yang Chen's ears. Ha ha ha! I didn't wait for you for a year and a half in vain. I've finally waited for you. Yang Chundai.